right, good evening, everyone. Time is 7 p.m., and at this point in time, I'll call the November 20th Select Board meeting to order. We have a handful of announcements and board openings. First up, we have one opening for an at-large member on the Community Preservation Committee, 2 associate openings for the Council on Aging, 1 associate opening for the Finance and Advisory Committee. Our Historic District Commission has a few openings, 2 for 3-year terms, 2 openings for a 2-year term. 1 must be a resident of the Historic District, and 1 must be a resident realtor in Hamilton. We have 1 opening on our Human Rights Commission, 1 associate opening on the Planning Board, 1 associate opening on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And at this point, we have space for public comment. If you are online, please raise your hand. If you are here, just come up to the podium and in both cases state your name, your address, and your business. You got 3 minutes to chat about it if you'd like to. Okay, seeing no comment, we'll move on to our consent agenda. We have a handful of minutes. Minutes from the Select Board meeting of January 23rd, 2023. Minutes of the Select Board meeting October 2nd, 2023. Minutes of the Select Board meeting from October 16th, 2023. And then we have an approved request for Sunday concerts in Patton Park for this coming summer. And a approved request for the Hamilton Wenham Ed Fund tree sale and sign at Patton Park. And we have a little disclaimer to discuss and vote because we tabled this one last time. So we can move the whole agenda, or we can hold the Ed Fund one if you want to talk about that some more. I know we have, I think, a student rep.
And Sean Timmons.
And Sean Timmons on the Zoom in case we have any questions for him. Sean sent me an email before the meeting saying there's info in the packet, but also that I think they measured their sign.
It's 3 by 10.
It's 3 by 10.
And they submitted all the paperwork that they were supposed to and included the insurance rider for signs that hang on the fence, so.
So I'll take a motion for the whole consent agenda, or we can single out that if we want to discuss it further. So follow me?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
All right,
Second.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Sean, and student representative. I forget your name. I apologize for joining us.
Hannah Siriello.
Thank you, Hannah.
And also the hold-up question was just making sure it's taken down in a timely manner, right? Wasn't that the big?
That was
They've agreed.
Yeah, that was-
They identified the exact date that they take it down by.
I see Sean
Yep,
nodding
exactly.
his head, so.
Yep, yeah, so it's all in the, I think the 3, or the few tasks were making sure we knew how many banners, what the size of the banners were, and then the date of takedown. So all those are in that email, which is in your packet. So that should, kind of take care of all those questions that everyone had.
All right, thank you, Sean.
All right, great, thanks, guys.
And then if we have any selectmen reports tonight, I just have a very brief one. I had a meeting of 5 chairs today with the school administration, school committee, Wenham staff, and our staff, and kind of our first blush at the budget numbers are kind of in from the school. It looks somewhat promising. I don't want to forecast it too much until we really get into it, but our superintendent, Eric Tracy, is working really hard to keep the numbers down. They do have a handful of contracts coming up in the future that they'll have to figure out some budgeting for. Also, Eric Tracy, you have a copy here of project timeline and stuff for the elementary school project that's in the feasibility study right now. Kind of a timeline and stuff like that. There were some representatives from the consultant group at the Cutler Ski and Skate Sale over the weekend. And then the Winthrop Holiday Bazaar Boutique thing, I forget what they call it, coming up soon. This same group will be there with Eric Tracy and answer any questions for people that have it.
This is great. I have a question. I've already seen the false narrative train has left the station online.
Yep.
Is there a plan to start distributing any sort of information?
I was gonna give Emma, if you could turn off the microphone and speaker on your laptop.
Yeah, it is. It is. Thank you.
You can mute her from there, probably.
Yeah.
So we talked about this. I was going to give an update on the last school building committee meeting last Monday, but we did talk about this and sort of address the conversations that are happening on Facebook and online. And I think Superintendent Tracy was just sort of encouraging everyone to be directed to the website, which is going to have the most updated information and, updating the FAQs. And then I think, with this engagement from the consultants is really to try to set the narrative as well and try to get that information out there. But I think the key part is, directing folks to the website where the FAQs are, just so that folks can get the right and accurate, up-to-date information, as opposed to just letting things, circulate online, which, you're right, there's a lot of misinformation being shared.
Yeah. And just one last thing before we move on to other people's reports, just to acknowledge we have a new Deputy Fire Chief, Dan Sullivan, who was inducted, exonerated, sworn in, all that kind of good stuff. Was it last week?
Yeah.
Last week. Week ago Monday. And so if anybody has anything else to share, Bill, you have anything tonight?
I think the two updates I would have had are the HTC is here tonight. We have a joint meeting, so we'll talk more about that. And the Master Steering Committee will give a brief update as well. So more to come.
Caroline, anything from you?
I went to a cultural council meeting last Monday. Just heads up, they were able to give out, I think, close to $15,000 in grants for various things, which is very exciting.
Awesome.
Otherwise, I would say we should just follow up on that conversation. I think it's a good idea to send to the website. I think it's still too vague. I think the questions that people are sort of pontificating about falsely, need to be directed directly, for lack of a better word.
Directly directed.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, I think as
Meg-
the engagement roll out with the consultants, I think directing people to those so they can specifically address questions with the consultants and have conversations. But, I think that's going to be key. But I also think, the website is going to have, the right, the most up-to-date information and the correct information. So that's, I think, if we can just drop a link into a Facebook page or something and being like, here's the FAQs, I think it will be helpful too.
Kind of keep
But I
pointing
think-
to it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Anything else? Tom, since you're on a roll, anything else from you?
I don't know if we want to wait till next meeting to give a more in-depth update of the school building committee. I know we're going to kind of talk about it, but do we want to tee it up, Joe, now, or just sort of?
I think, just to let the.
We've got Eric and the consultants coming in on the 18th meeting,
Yeah.
so,
That's all I was gonna say.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be it'd be a good thing to let people know now, and again on the 4th, that Eric Tracy and the consultants from the school feasibility study will be visiting with the select board on December 18th to talk about site selection and kind of go through where the project's at this point. That will actually be the first real big public meeting about, where everything stands and what's been considered, what isn't being considered, what still has to be explored. So anything out there that suggests that decisions have been made is erroneous. It is not factual. There have been no decisions made yet, so
We're not bringing a mega school?
No mega school at the moment, no.
not sure what they're bringing.
No, I think, so is that meeting on the 18th? That's good to hear. Is that just relating to this project or other school updates as well, like turf field, like budget, other things?
I can, if you want more, I can ask Eric to provide more. It's primarily to talk about site selection. So the one thing, the school building committee did hear from the consultants on 24 sites in Hamilton and Wenham were publicly owned sites, because they only looked at publicly owned sites because otherwise you have to get into the cost of
And
acquiring
eminent
a site.
domain and et
So they
cetera.
looked at 24 publicly owned sites that were large enough, potentially large enough, to have schools, and then for a variety of issues, there are only 2 sites that are really viable, and they're both here in Hamilton. So the select board needs to be updated and needs to make a determination about what you want to do for the town of Hamilton about those sites going forward. And that's the primary purpose of that meeting.
Yep,
Perfect.
Anything else, Tom?
that's it for me.
Bill?
I'm all set.
All right. Joe, anything you want to add?
No, we've successfully moved the staff from town hall to, in the case of the Inspection Service Department, they've moved to the modular addition to the Council on Aging building, and other than DPW, which is going to remain in the building, everybody else has moved out to Pat Homestead. Effective today, there'll be a couple days here before the holiday where we'll be getting people settled. We are open for business, people are welcome to come out, but we may take us a few minutes to find files and things. If there's specific things you need from town hall staff, please try to call ahead and let us know what it is you're coming out to see us for. Otherwise, we're open and looking forward to a couple of years out at the homestead.
Yeah. All right. Then on to our agenda. We have up first a master plan update with Judy Barrett of Barrett Planning Group. And Judy's been working with us to finish up our master plan, and she's going to share everything about it right now, I guess. Hi, Judy.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Tyler, I was going to say, where's Tyler? So Tyler's on with me. And we have a few slides to use to maybe try to help everybody understand where we are and how we got here. And we'll probably split this presentation in two, just so you hear from both of us, because it's really important to me that you also hear from Tyler, who really has been carrying the lion's share of the work on this project for us, and to whom I have tremendous gratitude. So I will just start this. I hope I have screen share, which I do. That's awesome.
You got it.
There we go. Come on. There we go. So this is an update. We're happy to be here. I like to try to keep select board members in touch with these processes, because often we're working with a planning board or with a planning committee. You're fortunate that you have a select board member on the master plan committee, which is great. But it's nice to make sure the whole board kind of knows what's going on. And it's been really a wonderful process, I think, from our point of view, with a lot of wonderful people who have been involved. So just to sort of clarify who the participants are, as I think you probably all know, we have a somewhat smaller committee we're working with now, which I think has been good. People who participated from the outset, who are named on this slide on the right. People's lives change, other commitments come up. And so we kind of worked with the town to narrow the group down to folks who really knew they could kind of get us to the finish line with the project. So we have a smaller committee now of 6, and they've been making their meetings and meeting a quorum, and it's just worked out really well. Of course, we have contact mainly through the staff with Patrick and Joe. And there are actually several of us in this firm who've had our hands on this project inside, not necessarily at all the meetings, but Tyler has been really the leading person on this. And I've been trying to keep sort of an eye on things and assert some direction where necessary. But Tyler has really done a fabulous job. And Amber Dillon is also helping us with selected pieces of the plan. And she was with us at the most recent community meeting. So I know you already all know this, but not knowing who might be watching this meeting from home, I thought I would just include a couple of slides kind of reminding everybody what this is that we're working on. So Hamilton's last master plan was about 20 years ago. It was a document that was very fond to me because I worked on it, so it's nice to be back. But the whole point of one of these documents is to help communities kind of express and agree upon a vision for how they want to be able to talk about their town in the future. And it's usually based on some principles that people generally agree upon in the community about what makes the place special, important, what's important to protect, and what's important to be able to steer change for as time goes on. You always have sort of a picture of what the place is today, and a lot of these projects, really the early part of it is just getting the inventory of where you are today straight. Because certainly you're going to be building from where you are. And you also want to understand what's been going well. Because when you go to implement a master plan, you're going to be building on your strengths, not the things that you're weak, that may be weaknesses. The plan should identify and articulate a plan for what needs to be preserved, what needs to change, what should grow, with a set of corresponding actions the town plans to take to achieve those various ends. A plan also should have a process for evaluating it. I think sometimes people are so tired by the time they finish one of these master plans, they just sort of want to go on and work on something else. But there really needs to be a more timely way to review where you are with the plan so that you're not having to necessarily wait 20 years to update it again. So part of the implementation process for this plan will be a more predictable way to stay on top of where you are with implementation and be able to monitor it at least on an annual basis. So you can foresee things coming down the road that maybe perhaps we couldn't all see today, but might become more apparent in, say, 3 or 4 years, and you don't want to wait 20 years to address those. So we will make sure that it has that. There is a vision and goal setting process is a lot of what we've been working on lately. The taking stock piece is the the where are you, that inventory that I talked about. And that also involves a lot of community consultation, which I think, as you probably know, there's been a fair amount on with this project between working with the master plan committee, but also community meetings and so on. The key issues component of the plan is sort of, so you have all these assets, you have things that you are in your community that you really love. This is sort of taking the temperature of where you are. But every town has issues. I have yet to work in a town that didn't have some issues and some needs. So having the plan focus in on what all of those are, so you don't get caught up in sort of extraneous things that are going to work themselves out anyway, but rather being able to really identify what are things that this plan needs to address. And that's where we've been. That's what we're now kind of using as a basis for developing the implementation plan. And then, of course, when the plan is done that we're working on, you then are going to have an extended period of implementation, monitoring, and so forth. As I think you all know, the master plan in Massachusetts consists of several elements, what we call elements. And the key ones are those which are listed on this slide. They are prescribed by statute. They include a land use plan, housing, economic development, natural resources, open space and recreation, cultural and historic resource areas, circulation and traffic, and public facilities and services. So those are the core elements. And very early on in your master plan process, your committee had kind of come up with a framework for thinking about how to organize the sort of moving forward with the plan in your community. And the framework consisted of these three concepts of protecting, providing, and grow. So what do we need to protect? What should we provide? And what should we grow? So all of the elements of the plan are kind of, as you get into the actual what do we need to do, are organized around those 3 points. And of course, not every element necessarily has something that needs to be concerned with protect or provide or grow, but where there are specific aspects of an element of the plan that relate to those 3, we've tried to make sure that they're in there. And so that framework kind of becomes the consistent thread throughout the document. We've had 3 major community meetings with your community, in addition to a whole lot of interviews that we did early on. As I think you all know, we kind of came into this process after it had started. So we needed to kind of step back a little bit and just talk to people and get up to speed on what was going on. The community meetings that we've held were in February and May, and of course, most recently in October. And each time, I think we got a lot of very helpful feedback from people who were in the room and just gave us a lot of ideas that we would never have come up with on our own. So I just want to do a really quick look at some findings that are in the master plan elements that I described previously. And rather than getting into each element one by one, I've kind of grouped them here. And it's not any surprise that they sort of end up grouping around this concept of protect, provide, and grow. So findings for natural resources, open space, and cultural and historic resource areas. Hamilton is really fortunate in that you've had several partners, if you will, in the preservation of open space in your community. And these are major players, as you know. So they have a lot to do with why your town has an abundance of open space and beautifully protected open space. You've recently completed a plan for a Patton Park, which is great. A lot of towns never get that far on any kind of recreational facility. So that's a source of information that helps the master plan, but it also says a lot about how much the community cares about the natural and open space and recreational assets you have. On the sort of protect or concern side, as you all know, the Ipswich River is one of the most endangered rivers in the country. It has to do with non-point pollution, it's drought, it's a number of conditions are really impeding the quality of that river. Your town has a lot of wetlands. It's really kind of remarkable. And about a quarter of the town is located in floodplains. And those things are important for a couple of reasons. One, they sort of say something about the physical composition of the community. They also hint at issues that have to be considered in zoning and other kinds of regulations that shape how your town's going to develop. You have some inventory of historic properties, including buildings, structures, and some objects. that are listed on the National Register or with the state through the Cultural Resource Inventory System that we call MACRIS. So there's been some effort in town to try to document those resources which are especially important to protect. In addition to having a local historic district, which you've had for several years, the town adopted a demolition delay bylaw since the last master plan was done. So demolition delay is a tool really which allows the historical commission to sort of look at any important, historically important structure in town, not simply those which are located in a local historic district, which is regulated by the Historic District Commission. On the provide side, you know, Hamilton and Wenham are unique. I love to talk about these two towns because, as I said, I worked with you folks 20 years ago. I work all over the state, and I've never seen another marriage quite like this one. So it is kind of an advantage that you have this history of joining with your neighboring town on the provision of certain services, and it's certainly something to celebrate in your master plan. I think you all know there's a need to upgrade water infrastructure to meet future demand. You're looking at possibilities for a new elementary school. You have public facilities that need work, and it's not uncommon at all in communities like yours, where so much effort is spent on just trying to maintain the quality of services that meanwhile, some decisions really have to be made about upgrading and improving the facilities that you currently have. You're fortunate to have a major transportation asset right in your downtown area. The train is a wonderful resource for the community. You do have, however, limited on-road bicycle infrastructure. And I just want to point out, this is something that actually was talked about 20 years ago, was the town's need for better bicycle safety systems. And that appears to be a continued unmet or insufficiently met need. Nonetheless, you've spent quite a bit of money on road repairs and drainage improvements. So the town is certainly doing things to try to protect the infrastructure that it has. The issue is that it needs more. So on the question of, you know, how and where to grow and for what purpose, land use, housing, and economic development kind of fit together almost like they're sort of inseparable. Nearly all of the land in your community is zoned for residential or agricultural uses. This is no surprise to anybody. That is a policy decision that's been in place for a very long time. You have chosen to have a really lovely downtown, but that's really where all of your kind of commercial and mixed-use development is located. Your housing is overwhelmingly single family, although there has been some multifamily development in your community that also exists. Because you have kind of a limited range of housing types and not a tremendous amount of housing, single-family housing growth that's taken place, there's a lot of pressure on Hamilton to house people. People want to live in Hamilton. Who wouldn't want to live in Hamilton? I would love to live in Hamilton, right? Well, when your demand, you know, outpaces the supply as much as it does, it's not a surprise that your single-family home price has just about doubled in not a very long period of time. You're not alone. Housing prices have escalated throughout the Boston area, but it does sort of raise a question of, well, what are we offering the market in terms of housing, and what does that say about who can live here now and who's likely to be able to live here in the future? And is that the kind of community that we want to have? And it's just a very important question to wrestle with. At the same time, you have a very small employment base. The town itself, including the regional schools, sort of the largest local employer. For the most part, your own labor force is leaving town to work elsewhere because you just don't have a large employment base. And those are all policy decisions, none of which we're going to knock in consulting to you, but just to make the point that that you have a lot of residential and agricultural development. And a lot of cost associated with trying to take care of the town that you have, but not an extensive tax base from which to draw. That is a policy decision that's been in place for a very long time in Hamilton. And I can't say, other than people being very concerned about taxes, that I've ever heard any sort of big agitation to make a fundamental change in what that is. So I think you're going to continue to kind of wrestle with some of these questions. You certainly did 20 years ago. You know, what are we as a town and what are we trying to be? And how do we juggle these competing interests of wanting to be a residential community, wanting to preserve the absolutely magnificent open space that we have, and at the same time be able to afford to be the town that we want to be able to provide the services and the infrastructure that we say we think we should provide. And on that note, I just point out that your commercial tax base is just a tiny fraction of the overall tax base for the community. And that's part of the struggle. And we're not going to say that's bad. We're just going to make the comment that that's part of the issue. So Tyler's going to talk about the vision and goals work that's been underway. I'm going to turn this over to you. Tyler, I'll just keep the slides moving, okay?
Yeah, sounds good, Judy. I'll just say next slide or some such. Yep. Hi, everyone. Tyler Marin, Senior Planner with Barrett Planning Group. Good to be presenting in front of the Select Board. So yeah, like Judy said, I'm going to take you through the vision and goals component of the plan. That's some of the more recent deliverables that we've been working on with the Master Plan Committee. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing now and how we're gonna wrap up this project nicely. So just to explain a little bit about what the vision and goals are and how they fit into the plan. These are really sort of the forward-looking aspirational parts. The vision is a statement about really where does Hamilton want to be as a town at the end of this plan's lifespan, 10 or 15 years, whatever it ends up being. So you'll see, I'll read it out to you, but it's in the present tense and it's aspirational. And then the goals are more specific, more specific milestones. There's one goal associated with each of the topic areas that Judy went over. And those are sort of, if you can think about it as if you meet those goals, then you will have a town much like is described in the vision. And then, the specific action items and recommendations are then really specific checklist items to recommend to the town to actually achieve those goals. So that's how everything fits in. And the key issues that Judy mentioned are basically, they slot in there as the most important things to address on your way to meeting those goals. So next slide, Judy. So the vision statement that we worked on with the Master Plan Committee, it follows that protect, grow, provide framework. So the vision statement is split into 3 parts, one for each of those categories. So for the first part of the vision statement, the town of Hamilton is a community that protects and preserves our valuable local history, including rich agricultural and equestrian traditions, protects the natural landscapes that give Hamilton its unique beauty and visual character, as well as sensitive environmental resources, and protects the ability of households of all types to call Hamilton home. Next slide. And this is the grow portion. So Hamilton is a town that grows our downtown into a vibrant destination for business, culture, recreation, and transit with easy access between points of interest. The town of Hamilton grows our local business community and housing stock while proactively planning for well-designed and environmentally sensitive development. And finally, Hamilton grows our local network of public access trails, paths, and sidewalks to help people experience Hamilton without needing to rely on cars. And then next slide, the final one is provide. So Hamilton is a community that provides safe and adequate utilities, roads, and accessible public spaces for its residents. It provides high quality and up-to-date public schools and municipal facilities. And it provides robust public recreation programs and facilities, especially on public open space. So you can see, even though that's not split and organized by the topic areas, it sort of covers the breadth of them and sort of distills all the information and other more specific implementation items into what are we actually trying to get at with all of this. So next slide, Judy. So following that, there's the goals. These are organized by topic area. There's one for each of the 8 elements in the plan. So I'll go through these, and then that'll be the last like substantive item, and then we'll talk next steps. So the transportation goal, ensure safe, high quality, and sustainable transit in Hamilton by maintaining the town's existing transportation infrastructure while creating convenient non-automobile connections between points of interest. Natural resources. The goal is to protect Hamilton's green spaces, natural resources, and sensitive areas from environmental threats by empowering the town to pursue and fund preservation efforts, enforce environmental regulations, and work towards its goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040. Cultural and historic resources. The goal is to protect Hamilton's historic structures and sites, especially in the Hamilton Historic District, and involve the community in celebrating and preserving local history and agricultural and equestrian traditions. Excuse me. Open space and recreation goal. Protect existing green spaces, scenic vistas, trails, and recreation sites. Improve local recreation programs, and make town-owned outdoor recreation areas available and accessible for the entire community. Next slide, please. And finally, the last 4, housing. Provide a regulatory framework to develop diverse housing types in a creative and environmentally conscious manner, and grow the town stock of affordable housing appropriate for a range of ages and household sizes, including affordable senior housing. Economic development. Support the town's existing business community by making downtown Hamilton more welcoming, more aesthetic, and more accessible, while encouraging commercial growth in appropriate locations across town by providing resources and support for local businesses. Community facilities and services. That goal is to provide high-quality public facilities and schools by engaging in preventative maintenance and renovations, improve Hamilton's capacity to provide community services, including through increased regionalization, and provide excellent public utilities that can meet the long-term needs of the community. And then finally, land use, and the order is sort of arbitrary, except for this one. This one comes at the end because the land use section is sort of about, where does this all take place? We want to encourage this type of housing, we want to encourage this type of economic development. Land use is sort of the question of, well, where do we want that? So the land use goal is to adopt land use regulations that promote responsible commercial and residential development while protecting the town's open spaces, natural landscapes, and built environment by prioritizing redevelopment in already disturbed areas. So next slide, Judy. So that's sort of the end of the part of this presentation that's sort of reviewing the product so far. I will note that if anyone wants to take a closer look at any of the drafts we've produced so far, there is a Hamilton Master Plan website. It is simply hamiltonmasterplan.com, and those documents are there for anyone to take a look at if you're so interested. And future documents will go up there as well. So what we're really working on now, having relayed the groundwork for thinking about the plan with the existing conditions section, figuring out where Hamilton is at and where it has been. The goals and the vision and the key issues are sort of, taking stock of what we want the future to be like. And so then the implementation program is, getting specific about how, the town wants to reach that future. So essentially the key part of the implementation program is a series of recommended actions. So each of these actions will be designed to further the goals identified in the plan. And the implementation plan, aside from merely just listing the items, includes details on who are the responsible parties leading each of these actions, what sorts of resources are needed for these actions, both in terms of just raw cash, staff support, other resources, technical resources maybe. An evaluation of like roughly, is this like a really urgent action, something to work on immediately? Is this something that maybe the town will probably address, more like in 5 years or even 10 years down the line? So a sense of where in the timeline it might fall. And just sort of the point of all this being a tool for the town to, in 5 years, when everyone forgets what we talked about at this time, to go back and have a guide to help the town make decisions about, okay, which of these items do we want to prioritize and how should we go about addressing them? And we should note that we want to give those guidelines without it being too prescriptive, because, things change. We don't want to say, in exactly 3 years, you must do this. What if you get an unexpected funding source in 2 years? So it has to have some flexibility to respond to the realities that the town will face that we can't anticipate. But at the same time, we want to give a good, framework for decision making. So that's what we're working on now. Do we have any other slides? That's okay. That's pretty much where we're at. So right now we're in the midst of working on this implementation plan. The last meeting I was at with the Master Plan Steering Committee, we basically went over our plans for working on that. I shared some of the basic draft action items, the format of that section, but really the bulk of that work is happening now. One of the important things we're going to do with this, I think we can take the, well, actually no, I'll go over what's on the slide so we don't have to put them up and put them down. The next important thing on the schedule is to consult with town staff, because when we are making actual recommendations, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be those town staff who are either implementing or at least helping to implement those items. So we need to, vet those things with the staff to make sure, they don't conflict with any existing plans, to make sure the way we framed things and the responsibilities we've assigned are realistic, and to catch any important priorities for staff that we've missed. And obviously then after that, the Master Plan Committee has the final stamp of approval on these plans, at least before it goes for official adoption to the Planning Board. So right now, our idea for timeline is, right now, our contract is just through the end of the calendar year 2023. It is our goal still to just have all the substantive work completed. But as I discussed with the Master Plan Steering Committee the other night, the Planning Board does have to ultimately approve this, so they will no doubt want to hold, at least a couple of hearings on this. They may have some comments, some fixes, some corrections, making the plan look nice. So I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of less substantive work bleeds over into early 2024. That is just sort of what it is. But we want to have this content really nailed down this year. And so then, so the very next step is, the ultimate goal of the Master Plan Steering Committee is to recommend to the Planning Board that they adopt the plan. So we work with them until we have, a full draft that they're comfortable endorsing. And then it goes off to the Planning Board for their final approval. The Select Board is technically not required to sign off on this, but I do believe there's going to be, a chance for you all to review and comment. Obviously, you're a very important board, even though the technical responsibility falls to the Planning Board to adopt the master plan. Yeah, I don't think I'm forgetting anything. That's about where we're at. Yeah, Judy and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. I just want to say it's been great working with the Master Plan Committee and working in Hamilton. Yeah, we've had a great time. It's gone really well. Thanks, Bill, for chairing. Yeah, we'll turn it back to the board.
Thank you, Judy and Tyler. Great presentation. I will start off with some board comments. Bill, you want to start us off with
Yeah,
anything?
I didn't know how much time we'd have. I did want to get this in front of this group as we are approaching, at least from a committee perspective, we're nearing the end of the project. We're coming up on a year now, working with Judy and Tyler and team. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thanks for going over that tonight. But I think it's important for everyone to understand, you know, we're working on finalizing the drafts, the goals, recommendations, and, you know, by the end of this calendar year, the committee expects to make a recommendation. You know, the formal flow will go to the planning board for adoption. I don't know if this board wants to be part of a meeting with that, or we'll just send off the final recommendation to everyone to review and then get back together. But, you know, be aware, you know, that Judy and Tyler and team, you know, technically are done at the end of the year, but I do think we'll get through the scope of the work by the end of the year, but the adoption piece will certainly flow into the first quarter of next year.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I would just be curious, anecdotally, where you think, like, the deviations might be from the way we've been doing things now. A lot of this sort of confirms, I think, the sentiment and sort of documents the current sentiment. But I wonder, when we talk about like policy and procedure and decision-making, like, do you see areas where this would shift the decision-making that we're currently doing in the town?
Well, I think it could, but that's a question really for the town, and I have to sort of turn this back to you. I mean, there are issues. Every community has issues that, you know, probably should be addressed, and they don't all address them the same way. And I think really our job is to try to prepare, be able to present to you, these are issues in your community, but you may decide as a town, Caroline, to say, we're content with the way we're handling these issues now. And so a plan like that almost becomes confirmatory, largely confirmatory, of how the community has been responding to things. But I mean, I think you're always going to have a bit of tension in Hamilton between the interests of preservation and the needs of growth, which I think, you know, was evident in the fact that the committee itself kind of came up with this three-piece paradigm that is very good. Those tensions are there. There are things you could do. They're probably not things that Hamilton would do.
Okay.
And that's not a slam at anybody. I'm just saying it's your town, and you get to make those choices. You know, you can say, and we've certainly heard, the town doesn't have enough of a tax base to support the things that people want. I work in a lot of towns that make the same statement. They don't all have a commercial tax base that's less than 4% of the total. But that's a policy decision Hamilton has made. Unless the town wants to change that, that's sort of the deck that you've given yourself to work with.
Yep. Thanks.
Other comments, Tom or Bill? We have Patrick Reffitz, our Planning Inspections Director, on, who's been involved in this process since the start. Any comments tonight from you, Patrick?
It has certainly been a lengthy process. I'd like to thank the members of the committee, past and present. I'd certainly like to thank Tyler and Judy. They've been wonderful. They've given us, I think, above and beyond service during the time that we've been working together. It's greatly appreciated. As Tyler mentioned, the two biggest next things we have to deal with is incorporating input from department heads, and then gaining the involvement and input and potential refinement from the planning board. So hopefully the document can be approved, and we can use it to move ourselves ahead. One of the most important things about a master plan is that it helps people like my boss and me review what's in the document, and it helps to guide where we invest our time,
Right.
where we invest town resources. So, that's super important for staff as well as for, say, an administration that may come along in the next 2 or 3 terms. So it's really helpful to have the benefit of the thinking because you're often asked, well, what does the town think about specific topics? And you have the ability to respond, well, here's what our master plan committee and document really worked on. They wrestled with it and they came to X. So, I'd like to thank all of the folks that have helped us get to this point. And I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen and Joe for having made resources available to help us get to here.
Thank you, Patrick. Much appreciated. It's good insight.
Yeah, Sean, I just have one
Yeah.
comment. I mean, I think it's an important tool, right? And a lot of work went into create this tool for the town. I just want to make sure we sort of understand how we're supposed to use the tool, right? So I think it's important we all get trained in sort of how we use the tool on sort of our daily, weekly basis to weigh decisions. I think it's an interesting step we need to take, is talk about how we use it, who uses it. So I think that's just as important as making the tool, but talking about how it gets used by us.
I think that's a really good point you bring up, Bill. Maybe when we do our kind of final wrap-up and presentation of everything in the implementation plan, we roll something into that on how boards and committees and town staff all are going to reference this kind of living document. What we don't want to do is spend all this money and manpower on something that just sits in a binder on a shelf. That's the worst-case scenario, right? It doesn't help anybody. We've wasted our time and money on it. We want it to be used and change as we go. To Caroline's point, if the politics or the attitude of the town changes on things, we update it as we go, so it's more of a living document instead of just a time capsule on a shelf. I think it's really important that we really do use it and know how to use it.
I think one of the best things you could do, and this will be in the implementation section, is when you're having your annual goal setting process, have every committee you appoint and your department heads say, what are they going to do this year to implement something in the master plan? So it's part of a conversation every year, instead of something that kind of gets forgotten easily. If you incorporate it within your annual goal setting process in some way, there's plenty of things to do in the plan. If everybody has to take a piece and say, well, this is what I'm going to work on this year, that makes it a living document in ways that no other process will. So it's something to consider.
I think that's a great point, Judy. That's a great idea. Just make it a part of our annual goal setting. All right, any other comments for Judy or Tyler? Thank you so much, Judy and Tyler, for joining us tonight. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yep, you too.
You both.
Bye-bye.
Our next agenda is to do our town meeting wrap-up, but if it's okay with the board, could we take things out of order a little bit and move on to our HDC joint part? Because I don't think the town meeting wrap-up is going to take very long, but there's a lot of people here to talk about HDC and downtown, et cetera. So we have a joint meeting with the Hamilton Development Corporation tonight, and just I'll kind of read off the laundry list of things here, and then we can start tackling one at a time.
They may want to call their meeting to order.
Rick, do you want to call your meeting to order, and then I'll read the laundry list?
Yes, thank you, Sean. I'd like to call to order the November 20th HDC meeting, and I'll wait until people sit down.
7:50 p.m.
Is it going to be difficult for your board members tonight, Rick, because it's not a breakfast meeting, it's more of an after-dinner meeting? Will they fall asleep during the meeting, or will they be okay?
Okay. So we won't have any alcohol?
No, not tonight.
Okay.
Maybe
So-
later, after we adjourn.
We usually start our HDC meetings with Bloody Marys, but, okay, well, I'll call to order the November 20th HDC meeting and roll call vote of members, starting with, and,
Ryan Stein.
Angela Arbanite.
can you guys sit down so they can actually see you guys who are actually here? And you're going to be making a presentation anyway, so. And and Chad Smith over there, sorry. And then our associate, I saw Tony, there he is. and myself, Rick Mitchell. And thank you for allowing us to come before you and have a joint meeting. The goal tonight is actually to do an overview of HDC and what we've been doing over the last, since our founding, actually, and this is really appropriate listening to the master plan. The HDC really grew out of the last master plan where it was recommending a economic subcommittee be established to look at opportunities to grow the tax base, especially in the downtown. It then morphed over time into what became the HDC. So the master plan really was feeding quite well into what we hope to do tonight. We'll have several members present just very brief updates of the projects that we've been working on. And then I know we want to get to a particular of interest of the reuse of the Winthrop School site and some thoughts we have on that. So for the general public, many of you may know, the HDC is celebrating its birthday this month because we were actually founded in November of 2013. We were created by the town petitioning the state legislature to create a public nonprofit that would focus on the development of downtown and promote local businesses. And it was charged with doing so and supported by a meals tax, and has had the benefit of that meals tax since its founding. Over the last 10 years, I'll just briefly highlight some of the things that we've done. Other members will get into a little bit more detail about that. In no particular order, we created downtown design guidelines because there were none at the time, and as you can travel through downtown, you'll see there's kind of a hodgepodge of different designs. We'd like to address that in a more comprehensive manner, and we'll talk about that later. We wrote and town meeting passed a mixed-use bylaw that didn't exist for mixed use in the downtown. We drove the development of an 18-unit mixed-use development that Brian Stein's going to talk a little bit about, and more than increase the tax revenue from that piece of property by a factor of about 10. We also, during COVID, were awarded a $50,000 grant by the Office of Business Development to promote local businesses and Local HW, which is a local business group that we helped form and have supported during our 10-year tenure. We've also sponsored multiple fall festivals that Angela will talk a little bit about. We've explored other downtown mixed-use development opportunities, especially on Willow Street, that Chad's going to talk a little bit about. We've done benches and trash receptacles on Railroad Avenue. We continue to fund summer flower baskets and holiday wreaths to give some cheer to the downtown. We also established a marketing grants for local businesses, one of which has been used by the baking company that's going to occupy the mixed-use development at Willow Flats, and we hope Brian probably can update us that will be opening in January. So that'll be a nice use of that property. And we also contributed 50% of the cost to a parking study that I know Scott's going to talk about. And then we committed, last but not least, $100,000 to the engineering that was needed to submit the MassWorks grant application for a $5 million infrastructure upgrade in the downtown from really Linden to the town pool, looking to get the state to fund redevelopment of the roadway and sidewalks and pedestrian safety upgrades to try and reconnect the two really separate economic zones of downtown. So that's really just a quick highlight of some of the activities that we've engaged in. We've got a very active board, and I want to introduce next, I think, Angela, just to give a brief update of the Fall Festival and some of the activities that occurred there. And then Chad, I'm going to ask you to get up and talk a little bit about our pursuit of other options on Willow Street. And then I think Scott's going to take over on the agenda.
Thanks, Rick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Arbonites. I'm a Hamilton resident and a downtown business owner. Sorry, I thought Rick was talking to me. I formed Local HW along with two other local business owners, Jan Solman, who lives in Wenham and owns Clutch Towels, which some of you may know, and Karen Moulton at TM Landscaping. And we saw a need to get the businesses to work together, to communicate with the town, to help understand what some of the things were that were needed downtown, lighting, signs, sidewalks, that sort of thing. And I joined the HDC and sort of became the liaison between that group and the HDC, who, without them, we wouldn't have been able to put on the fall festivals, which we've had, and now I think 3 in a row. We also had a downtown Christmas event. It helps the community to be aware of the things that are offered right here in town, which I think a lot of people sometimes sort of drive right by downtown and are not aware. So it's an opportunity for us to bring attention to what's available downtown. And without the HDC help, support of those events, we wouldn't be able to do it on our own. I think that's about it. The other thing was just to touch on what Rick was talking about the grant that he helped us get, the $50,000 grant that allowed us to build a website, to brand ourselves, to get a membership platform. It also allowed us to put out 2 different directories, which some of you may have gotten in the mail, which is a compilation of all the different downtown businesses that then got mailed out to everybody in town. So we're just working to try and get the businesses to see the value in what we're doing and to come join us so that it can continue to flourish. Thank you.
Some of that grant money go out to, you send some of that grant money out to local businesses as well?
No, not that grant money, no. No, well, that's what Rick was talking about, is the implementation of the grant program that the HDC actually funds.
Angela, can I ask you one more question
Sure.
before you run off? With twice now I've gotten kind of the HW local kind of business listing in the mail.
Yep.
Which is great, because
Yes.
there's so many things in there that you would never expect are in Hamilton. If
Yes.
someone watching this or in the future has a business in Hamilton, they want to get on that list, how would they do that?
Well, there's one of 2 ways. One is that you want to make sure your business is registered with the town, because that's how we obtain information about what businesses exist here. And the second would just be to go to our webpage. You can go to our webpage and send us a note. Or we also have a pretty robust Facebook page at this point with, I think we have over 1,000 followers, which for our small community is pretty impressive. And it's a great way for businesses to drive conversation there, because previously that didn't really exist as far as social media was concerned, because the resident page is really, not meant for that
Non-business
sort of
page,
thing.
right.
Yeah, so that's worked out well.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Chad Smith, local business owner in Hamilton, and I live in Hamilton as well. And I own a commercial building on Railroad Avenue, so I really love the downtown area, obviously. Just wish it was a little bigger. So yeah, we've been focusing on trying to find another property, and we have obviously contacted the people we might think would be interested in selling it sometime in the future. And Chris from Dodge Tree and his wife, I spoke to both of them a couple different times, and they haven't closed the door. So there's might be an option there in the future. But as you know, there's just not a lot of commercial space in town. There's not a lot to go after. But when we see something, we try to reach out to the property owners and just kind of get into their ear and see where we can go from there. Unfortunately, there's not, I wish I had more to report on that, but there's only so much we can go after. So, and we hope to be able to find something else similar to Willow Street where we can, put a plan together and pitch it out to a developer and sell it off again and get some sort of mixed-use building in Hamilton. Yeah.
I think it's good, Chad, to have those kind of conversations at this point before it's up for sale and you might not have an option on the property. So I think it's good to start those conversations, and even though they may be difficult at times, they're worthwhile for the kind of greater good of the community to see what the future thoughts are on the property. So I think that's good.
Yeah. Could be 5, 10 years down the road. You never know.
You never know.
Yep. Is that it? Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Good evening, everyone. Brian Stein. Been up here a number of times in the past few years. I think I've given this speech a few times as well. So most of you on the board know what Willow Flats is and how it kind of came about, but for those of you that don't, I'll give a quick synopsis. As Rick said, HTC was founded in 2013, and shortly thereafter we purchased 59 and 63 Willow Street from a longtime business owner and owner of the residential property that was there. Over the course of a number of years and a number of public meetings with neighbors and so forth, we kind of figured out what the best use of that property was. We put out a couple of different RFPs to developers, probably between 2016, 2018, something like that, and really didn't have a whole lot of luck in terms of getting someone to bite on the property. And I think roughly around 2019 or so, we decided to kind of go forth ourselves and hire an architect, hire a civil engineer, and permit the property ourselves with kind of what you see now, 18 units of residential, between 1 and 2 bedroom units, and commercial space on the first floor along with parking. And by doing that, we had a saleable property, we had a saleable development that we then were able to find Tregorth Development, who purchased the property, purchased those development rights, and then built Willow Flats as you see it today, very much the same as we had permitted. And then, as Rick mentioned, there is a tenant who is signed up for the commercial space. It is fully built out. I'm actually doing a walkthrough tomorrow, final walkthrough with the building inspector and the owner and others, and we should get our C of O. And in terms of move-in date, I'm not 100% sure if it's January, but it's going to be January, February, somewhere around those times for Treat Cakes and Confections. It's a small local bakery owned by a former Wenham resident. They currently bake out of First Church in Wenham in their commercial kitchen now and have for the last 3 or 4 years. My wife actually works there as well, so it'll be a nice commute for her. And it's going to be a great little local business to have, and they make some amazing baked goods and pastries and so forth. So I encourage everybody to check that out when they can, once they're open. And, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Not so far? All right.
Thank you.
Evening, everyone. I'm Scott Mattern. I'm the HDC. I'm also the treasurer of our organization. Here to talk to you about 3 things, and I'll be back later about one more. And at the end, ask you to make a decision, which is, I think, included in your agenda. First is about downtown parking. We've been actively involved in that as a joint project between the town and the HTC that we sponsored going back to 2020. You all selectmen are intimately aware because you approved parking regulations recently. For anybody else who isn't, you're aware of the parking issues that we have downtown. It isn't just quantity, but how it all gets used. The business owners oftentimes really can't have the turnover in parking spaces that they need to happen. When the parking regulations are here, there were business owners who actually spoke about that, how they're losing business. People just drive by because parking spaces are occupied by people who are essentially parking for free and using the T or the train to get into town. Plus, signs are not clear, rusted, there's no stripes, there's no marking. And thanks to the neighbors that are here, the businesses that are here, the community house representatives are here, everyone has expressed these needs to us about not just Railroad Ave. It's Willow Street and Asbury, and how you cross any of the roads around where they are once you do park. Very, very challenging for us. So it was great news that you all approve the parking regs. What's going to happen, so people know, is that pretty soon DPW Director Tim Olson is going to actually do some temporary striping. Signs are going up, and what's actually going to happen is the police are going to start to enforce the parking regulations. So it's 2 hours in most places. There's some 30-minute parking near the corner of Asbury and Willow, and the way they're going to do that is through a series of what they call education, which I presume means you're not getting tickets right away, but We got to start people to understand that this is not forever parking. There's also different parking on different sides of Willow Street, depending where there's commercial areas and residential areas. So, and that goes all along Willow Street all the way to Linden, trying to be considerate of all the neighbors that are there. So all we ask from HTC standpoint is, this was, when you all went over this, it was kind of a temporary thing. Tim said he would come back and do final etching, as it's called, and markings and whatnot. If you'd come back and review that with the HDC, not that we're everything, but we have, as you can see, a lot of contacts with folks, and we'd like to make sure that what's the feedback we're getting, what are we hearing, what's that final plan going to be, so when Russ and Tim finally say this is it, we're part of that decision. Another thing that's been interesting to work on and feels really great, I think we had a big community meeting in April, and one of the things that came up about safety, pedestrian safety in particular, but bike and other, is that Asbury Street, so much is going on between Asbury and Willow and backing up from Bay Road, highly complex intersection, different times of the day. The community house is an extremely active organization that gets used by hundreds and hundreds of people all the time. The Patton Park is there, and that's being used all the time. Well, even getting to school or crossing Asbury Street was dangerous. So we asked the town, and what came out of that meeting was to put some flashing stop signs at the intersection of Willow and Asbury. So those, the DPW director did that, which is great. HCC is sponsoring a portion of that. That was part of our commitment to help make this happen, so this is another joint thing. Tim also got funding to do one at Union in Asbury, which is nice, a little outside our district of influence. And one of the nice things is, as soon as we come up with what we actually want on our sponsorship sign, the artistic talents of the Chairman Farrell will come into play, and he'll actually design our sign that'll go on the signpost. So these are all kind of in context of downtown safety, traffic calming, bicycle, and pedestrian access that are so critical down there, because it's typical. You drive to Patton Park and maybe do something, then you drive down to the shops or somewhere around there on Railroad Ave. A lot of people don't even think about parking one place and walking all the different places, let alone if you got a bicycle, kids coming and going from school, letting a kid just go downtown to go explore what's down there. So we, HCC in the town, another joint project, this thing called MassWorks, really Rick Mitchell deserves so much credit for this, because he wrote most of this grant, helped find the right contractor, worked with the DPW director, and there's, I don't know if you all have seen this, but if you want, Bill, I know you've seen this. Bill's our liaison to the HDC. These are some graphics from a $5 million grant that we submitted to the state earlier this year. And it's all about traffic calming, because Bay Road in particular is way too wide in terms of the traffic area. The road itself is plenty wide to have parking and bike paths and narrower roadway for cars. But we have 12 to 14 feet kind of wide areas for cars. Well, therefore, when it's wide, people go fast. And you don't have to be that wide. The state regs don't require that. In fact, the retooling of this says narrow it way down. It slows the traffic down, because nothing's going to be perfect. It's always going to be people in a rush and a lot of folks coming and going. But narrowing the roadway is really important. And we follow the state guidelines in terms of bike paths along the road as well. But it wasn't just Bay Road, because Bay Road, as Rick said, in the trains, you heard in the master plan, these things are positives in a way. They also divide our town. And the train comes and goes, or the traffic is a throughway for commuters going through our town. And we don't have this whole kind of, all of a sudden, especially coming from the south, it's like, welcome to Hamilton. Like, most people, I ask them, well, what does it feel like you're in Hammy? What does it really look great? It's like, well, you got to get past the trains. You see the community house and the senior center and some of these nice buildings and then the Patton Park, and you're going, oh, that's, it's pretty cool. It's nice, but the rest is like you're just flying through it as fast as you can and hope the train thing isn't dropping. So anyway, we went through a grant that was more expansive than that. We all know the sidewalks are terrible downtown. They're not wide enough. You can't have strollers or double wides or, if families get out and around. Same happens along Railroad Ave and on Willow Street, and certainly along Asbury, where there's a sidewalk on one side, but I don't know, people don't use them. They just walk across Asbury Street. So we went through this design activity with a company that we all seem to respect a lot. We applied to the state for $5 million and got nothing, which stinks. We lobbied hard. Rick led a lot of that with our state representatives. They were incredibly disappointed. And the reality is what we came up with was based upon what our community wants. People here, we had other community meetings, people came to these things, this $5 million is what we want to do. So it's important that it gets into the town plan somehow, not just as like, oh, we threw a Hail Mary to the state and there's $5 million that's going to show up. So, so there's a way for the town to do this. We have a capital plan, which is, it doesn't say something gets done exactly when, but that's where we put a list of things that says, here's the stuff that we want to get done. We have a defined $5 million project that we want to get onto the town's capital plan. So the good news behind that is, of this $5 million, best estimate, for at least from the engineers, about 3/4 of that is related to Bay Road. And likely is going to involve DOT and state funding in the end in some way, because it's a state highway and the trains come and go through there. So we realize that we can't just plop one $5 million thing on a pin and go, oh, that's going to happen in a certain year. So what we're also saying is we're asking you to tell a town manager to say, not only put this in the capital plan, but to have the DPW director, Tim Olson, work with us so we can come up with a little bit of phasing. Because if it's really, when we think it is about 1/4 of this, that's Willow and Asbury and Railroad Avenue, well, $1 million to $1.5 million is still a big number, but it's way more digestible for the town and something under our control that we can do when we see fit within our capital plan. So our ask of you, and it's in your agenda, is that you make a decision tonight to ask Joe to put that in the capital plan and ask the DPW director to work with the HDC to create a phasing so that we can figure out a good way to help spread that out in the capital plan. So those are 3 things that I said I was going to talk about and ask that you make a decision about the last one. But certainly Q&A before you get into motions and decisions and anything else that you would like.
Thanks, Scott. Comments or questions of Scott's? Comments?
I mean, the parking, to refresh my memory, we still have to finalize that? I thought we had.
You finalized the parking regulations, what they'll be. We've ordered signs. We're going to be putting up the signs outlining where the parking is and starting to, as Scott referred to it as Chief Stevens refers to it as a education program by which you'll start to tell people, okay, you're parked here, you're not supposed to be parked here. They won't get tickets, they'll get notices.
Are we changing the design? I mean, I thought we finalized the design or a
You did,
plan. Okay,
yeah.
because Scott made it sound like we were still
No, but
finalizing it.
I think his point is that during the education campaign, before we permanently stripe the roads, there might be an opportunity to say, what did we learn during this education campaign? Is there
Change
anything
it,
we want to adjust?
tweak it, okay.
And they may come back.
Based upon whatever feedback that comes along, based
There
upon
may
the
be a
striping,
request to
what
tweak
the
it at the
police
end.
find out, what the business owners start seeing as actual enforcement or not, or changes. So let's keep it open so that it's not just, it's done. That's why the HCC is here. We're an arm to help get feedback and help the town make good decisions.
if you could just come right up. That way the folks at home and on Zoom can hear you, and it's part of the minutes as well. Yeah, anybody at home, if you, or I should say, you might not be at home, but on Zoom, if you want to comment, just please raise your hand. If you're here, just please come up to the podium.
I missed all you just said, but I'm going to just introduce
you're doing
myself.
great
So
so
I'm
far.
Martha Driscoll. I live at 85 Linden Street. So my question is on the grant, did they tell you why they denied the grant? Were there areas we could go back and do an appeal? Can we massage it a little bit? Maybe not go for 5 million, go for a different amount? How did that process work?
That's a great question, and Rick can answer it, but I'll maybe hopefully say something that Rick's not going to say. But basically, I've talked to our state rep when I saw him a couple weeks ago and asked him, but basically we could have a debriefing so they could give us some of that information on what was a hit, what was a miss on it, and what we could do differently.
Right, and in fact, I just got, at the end of last week, an email from the state wanting to schedule a half-hour debrief. So the challenge is going to be, I've asked both Bruce and Kristen if they would attend in person those debriefs, just so they understand what's going on, so that also that the state understands this is an important issue. So we'll have a better understanding. My sense is that I was looking at the grant funding. They didn't fund any community, and this is new, over $1 million. So I think they had a limited appropriation, or I don't know what they're doing new and different. Maybe they're trying to spread the money because previously they have dispensed much larger sums, but we'll find that out.
One couple additional pieces of information might help you as you move on to a motion, maybe in a decision, which is the company BSG, the engineering group. I asked them as part of this debrief, okay, we didn't get it, but we want to do this still. What are the current cost escalators that you're running into in your projects around? And they hesitate to give a number, but the last 3 years have been totally crazy. And they're using 10% per year cost escalators now as far as what's going on. Well, that to me says we have a sense of urgency behind doing this because the numbers are growing faster than our revenue streams in Hamilton. And especially if we can move forward on a quarter of the project, then that impact is somewhat less as well. So, and just so you know, as a follow-up based upon what happens at this meeting, we'll certainly be communicating this with the FinCom. We have a meeting with them next week. Rick and I are going to them talk about some of these same topics and the results of the meeting so that they understand some of what's going on there as well.
Can you clarify, what is the specific scope that you're asking to be put into the capital plan?
The entire $5 million project.
But is there like an itemized list of like, that was an estimate, right? There is no confirmed contractual agreement, so is it, because I've seen beautification, I've seen sidewalks, I've seen bike lanes. Is there a specific itemized scope that we should be looking at? Because it can't just be like the $5 million, because what if we price it out and it's 7.4, to your point? Like, what are the things?
Yeah, well, first of all, you wouldn't do any pricing. The way I understand the capital committee works is that it gives advice to Joe that you use, so you want it to get into the capital committee so that they have this on their list, so that they can start to go, what is this? What are the details behind this to understand what it is? We have a full grant application,
That's
which
what I'm saying. You're saying consider that, I'm saying what is the scope? What are the itemized things within the scope? So that, I mean, maybe half of them we want to make a recommendation to the cap committee, but not all of them? Is there just a list
so
of the scope?
Can I help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the ask isn't to put it in the budget right now. I think we have a 5-year capital plan, right? I think everybody here has seen it. I was on the capital committee. It's an advisory board that reports into Joe, as Scott said, which aggregates all of the projects and spend from a capital perspective that different departments and even the school district want to spend. You know, this is a plan that includes a new school, it includes the athletic fields, it includes water, all DPW work, all facilities work, everything. It's not the budget, but it's a 5-year plan that looks to do just what you described. It puts all the projects, you know, people like Tim could go to that. I think we have to take this $5 million grant and break it in break it up into like congestible buckets, right? Because we're not going to spend 5 million. We've got the town hall stuff as well, but I would hope that we would want to get this on that 5-year plan, have a category that's called, HDC, and then get those who need to get involved, get a lot of smart people on the HDC as well as some town staff that could maybe start breaking that up and throwing it out over the next 5 years and start putting dollars, estimates to projects to be done, whether it's safety, beautification. Downtown was all over the 5-year, the master steering plan that you heard about, right? A vibrant downtown was probably there were probably 3 of our elements that touched downtown alone. So I think we need to have it out there, we need to look at it. Doesn't mean it goes in the budget, but it needs to be part of the
But this is
conversation.
just a straw vote. I mean, we don't typically tell the capital committee, they're an advisory committee to Joe, and they have their own agenda.
Yeah,
So
so-
we're just basically doing a straw vote that we support, but not,
If I can offer,
Yeah.
normally the process for getting items onto the capital, because most of the capital items in town that we consider are things that we already own, or things we're looking to improve or replace. So those come through to the capital plan through the department heads. This is coming from the outside. And so it was just kind of a little bit of my saying, this has to come in from somewhere. So basically, we're asking the select board to push it into the plan.
So
that we
What does
can-
the outside mean, though?
giving
I
it
don't
to the
understand that.
inside, the channel to Joe to have the Capcom.
Well, I don't
put it on.
understand the outside, though, George, just to clarify.
I mean, it's not, it isn't, there isn't a department head that oversees the downtown.
Same with the school. We
Right.
pull all,
Right.
I've got like 30 million in
There's a
school stuff in there.
But there's a superintendent that can push that stuff to the.
Right, much like there's a HDC committee that can push that stuff to us. I think as a community, anything that we're gonna ask the town folks to pay for needs to be on that plan. And it doesn't matter if it's coming from the inside, outside, school, HDC, or one of the department heads. I think it needs to be on that list.
Yeah, I kind of 2 points that are related, but not, I guess, they'll help the conversation a little bit. I'm on the CPC committee, the Community Preservation Committee, and we have a kind of a laundry list or wish list of projects that some have been on it for a number of years, and they may never come to fruition, but they've been on our radar because some citizen has come to us and said, or a committee member itself has come and said, hey, what about this project? And there may be just a guesstimate of a price on it, but we've got it on the radar in case somebody really wants to push it and bring it forward and ask for an eligibility grant for it to bring the town meeting. The other thing is, I've been around a few years now, and the 20-plus years I've lived in town now, downtown improvements have always been at the forefront of anybody that you ask, really. It's the schools in downtown. We do see that the downtown has some deficiencies in it with the sidewalks, et cetera, and there's a lot of room for improvement there to help. And Rick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but was it maybe 5 or 6, maybe even longer than that, years ago, we had the charrette with MAPC, and we looked at kind of a visioning studies. We kind of put all the downtown recommendations together, and they really did kind of a pie-in-the-sky view of what downtown could be, but we've kind of looked at that plan, and then with BSG, we've kind of put some kind of tooth to it now, that it's not just pie-in-the-sky stuff, that we have kind of a deliverable almost. So I'm all for putting it on the capital.
Yeah, I guess just my thought is to kind of Caroline's point of, putting something on the capital plan. I understand that it's, kind of pie in the sky, and it's not sort of, we're not going to invoice every little detail, but it is helpful to have at least some sort of scope on the sense of like, what is the 5 million entail?
Yeah, I think a
what are the
list would be
4 or
good.
5 buckets that you're going to be doing? And looking at those pictures, I mean, I think there's, obviously some real, interesting development that you want to do around it, but to break it down in certain categories of like, we want to plant, trees, we want to do sidewalk, we want to do this, kind of like 4 or 5 buckets, and like have a general scope of what you're looking for, to have some sort of thing you can wrap your head around, rather than just saying 5 million for capital improvement downtown.
No, we have that, actually. The diagrams that you were looking at was the result of about $150,000 of engineering. If you were in downtown last winter, they were out doing site surveys, actually doing, measuring the roadways to know exactly what the widths were of the sidewalks, of the roadway, where the property lines were. So, and it was a very specific list, and we can show you, the grant application of sidewalk expansion, pedestrian safety crossings, putting those in, and planting trees and road, and putting in bikeways. So, and actually granite curbs as well. So there's a very specific list. This isn't just sort of pie in the sky.
Literally just asking if there was a list. That's literally all I asked.
There is a list, yes.
And I got a very snide response. I'm just asking if there's a list that we could see that says, like,
What's
I
that?
would in fact say to the Capital Committee, like,
Yep,
we
here's
think
this
this
list.
is a great list. That was all I needed, was a list. I feel like that really went
I
in
just
circles.
asked it better, Caroline.
Yeah, I
guess,
just need a fan to ask. I'm so glad I have so many of them.
Well, you got it finally.
Great, thanks.
But I do think there's more work to be done on the list. I think that's where Tim comes in and Joe comes in, and really.
Phasing
And to be
possibility.
clear to the HTC as well, just because you're on this, it's not the budget. It's a kind of 5-year capital plan that's, needs and wants and prioritized. Sources of funds are laid out. A lot of it could still be grants, could be debt, could be, taxpayers.
And the
but
5 years,
it's-
the 5 years is just a way to contain the
Yeah.
list. Stuff moves on that list, and there are
Right.
often things that are in year 3 that move out to year 5. Things that are in year 5 get pushed out when the plan gets updated to
Constantly.
the next year. So it's not like
That happens
would
all the
all
time.
happen in 5 years, but it gives us a place to start talking about everything.
Right, we did that with our fire truck because we saw the run time on, or the lead time on getting it here, so we moved it up a year or so.
Just one question on the grant, and forgive me if you already answered this and I missed it, but is that an annual grant that you can reapply again and again, or is that a once and done?
That was once, and this is Snidely Whiplash back at the stage, so I apologize if I offended you. The grant itself was done, I thought maybe you had more information already available to you. It was done together with the town. It was a joint thing. That's why it even extended all the way to the patent, to the pool and past there, because that's really beyond the jurisdiction of the HDC. We encourage the town to work together on this. So it was really an application of the town, not the HDC, for this $5 million. So I thought maybe you had some of that background. So I apologize for how that came across. So.
I think procedurally, I think working with Scott and Rick, they very passionate about the fact that to get things done, you got to work hard, you got to put the work in. So if this is their next step to tell us we got to put the work in, then I think procedurally we just got to put it on the capital plan and start doing the work to figure out what we got to do. So I think.
So we're basically
I'm-
taking this grant application and the work within that and saying, since we didn't get the 5 million, we want to give it to the Capital Committee to prioritize.
Right.
That's
Correct.
the ask. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. And then within that, we'll have our DPW director, Tim Olson, look at the plan and see if he can break it down even more with.
Call out things that we can do on our own, things that are going to need state. But the elements that are going to need the state involved.
Just the Bay Road stuff.
The Bay Road stuff is, I wouldn't even hazard a guess on the timeline on that. Because Wenham has been working on.
With their lane there, yeah.
On their new streetlight for.
Yeah, 10 years at least, probably.
Yeah,
Well,
and
so I would.
Just asking for a streetlight.
And I don't see any way that we're carrying all the water on this, just given that this 3/4 of the scope is likely Bay Road. It just isn't, I just don't see how that's going to happen in the end. So will we attack it in other ways? I sent a more detailed alternate funding note to Sean and to Bill and to Joe, that there's other grant applications that we maybe go after. I think it's my experience, like with lobbying with the state on the library, for example. I remember going to the Ways and Means Committee and for the lobby for the library, and the whole idea was just get on the list. You got to get on the list. If you're not on the list, it's never happening. So we're not saying when, but it gives Joe and his staff, FinCom inputs, yourself, the ability to start going, oh, well, it really, we get to work on, here's $1 million, that's the first phase, and if that could get done in a year or two, this is what it would look like. Then that capital plan starts to take better shape.
So I would move that we add a section to our 5-year capital plan called HDC Hamilton Development Corp. And ask that Joe and the town staff work with the Capcom to itemize that list, get it into approachable buckets, and prioritize it and identify sources of funds so it becomes part of our capital planning process.
Second.
Any further discussion? Comments?
Pro sidewalks, whatever we can do to get more
Bill
sidewalks.
Olson, pro sidewalks.
Bike lanes and sidewalks.
Yeah.
How full is our 5-year plan, and is this just like a thing that we do to say that we're like, Is it realistic?
You
that
haven't
we're-
seen the 5-year plan?
I'm just asking, like, 5 years.
Every year at town meeting since I've been
Yeah.
here, that we go to town meeting and ask for capital improvements.
I can pull it up.
Every year, all those items have come off the capital plan. Every
Right,
single one of those
I
items.
guess what I'm asking is.
There's
like,
there's lots of hopes and
when
dreams.
you
There's
add
lots of hopes and
something
dreams on
new,
there
are we
too.
adding
So
It's what it's
all right.
supposed to be, right?
Supposed to be.
It's
It's hopes and
50,000
dreams.
things or a list of 20 things?
No, the
it's- no,
town side, the
it's-
list is shrinking. We've
Yes.
been doing a good job of trying to knock things off of that, and with town hall.
School side is a big one.
with
The-
town-
Oh, yeah, I bet the school side.
With the town hall now off of it, we're in pretty good shape. We need to maintain, and we'll be adding things this year, but that's.
Water's a big item.
We
big
usually
The
don't
time.
have
water,
a
we
ton.
knocked
The
a
big
lot of
ticket
water.
items are usually water. Town hall was a big one.
Facilities.
And then we've had a handful of infrastructure things, sidewalks and stuff like that.
I was just wondering more like a $5
Another big one
million
is,
project.
another big one
Where would that kinda sit?
our kind of combustibles with vehicles.
Yep.
Fire, police, et cetera, stuff like that.
Yep. Okay.
So it'd be a section, and it'd probably roll out into multiple years and have those buckets that you talked about, whether it's parking, safety, sidewalk, whatever, and roll it out through years, but it would subtotal to a 5 million or whatever it might end up being.
Right.
And then down below, it'll sources of funds. And
I didn't call the vote on it yet, did I?
We got a second.
Nope, we had a second by Tom, I think.
We're having further discussion.
Further discussion. Any further discussion?
I'll shut up.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, unanimous. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Scott, et cetera. Other HDC?
Good stuff. A talented crew.
Just a quick update. We've been talking about a pocket park, Bay Road, Railroad Avenue. It's owned by a condominium trust that currently owns it. It's the vet and the M&T Bank, and I'm drawing a blank. What's the property owner's name?
Cutter.
Thank you, David Cutter, who has actually been very helpful. M&T Bank hasn't. So the HCC is committed to $150,000 to actually redo that and turn it into a public pocket park and make it as a little island oasis of calm and green in that space. And Dave Cutter and the vet have agreed that they would like to support that, and we would sign a long-term lease for probably $1 a year, and we would fund the construction of that pocket park. So we're awaiting a response from their attorneys with some sort of a form of agreement. So it's an ongoing discussion that we've really been talking about for probably 9 months, but we hope to move forward with that early in the next year.
And for people at home who may be listening, that was at the corner of Railroad and Bay Avenue.
That's where
But
the
the
big
tree,
tree
the
is.
tree
big
gets lit,
tree
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's that
Right.
little green space there.
Right.
Who puts the lights on that tree?
Say again?
Who puts the lights on that tree?
Scott.
Is it Scott? You just climbing up there every year?
I don't know who, I actually.
I don't know who did it last.
Those lights have been there for
There
years.
for a long time.
They don't come down.
They stay up all
They
year.
just turn them off.
They've been there as long as I can remember, really. so.
Somebody in this town is secretly plugging those in every year, and we have no idea who it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Do you have a rep with the MBTA or somebody from HTC that, I see that regularly, you mentioned that as a divider and they're doing a lot of things. Is there regular communication?
It's dicey. Like, when we went through this last grant application, work with the engineers in that group, we did everything to avoid the MBTA in their rules, not their rules and regs, but just the interactions with them. Like, okay, here's their rules, how do we do everything that kind of works around them, because they're notoriously difficult to work with. Which a little bit relates to this next topic I'm going to talk about, which is Winthrop reuse. And I'll just hit right on that, because when I brought it up with the CPC, Jay Butler, that we were here and what we're going over and what was happening, and he goes, about Winthrop reuse, he goes, well, why aren't you talking about the new bylaws that require so much housing near train stations? I said, well, it's woven in here, we're just not being it's not being prescriptive about how to do this. It's Hamilton, you know, there's only so much space, so many places to do anything. So what I'm here is to describe a project which I provided in writing to you before, but let me read it out to everybody so you hear it, because it could touch a lot of us in many ways, and do things, a rare moment for our town where we have a Patton Park master plan. We just talked about a different traffic calming, bicycle, pedestrian safety activities. You're going to hear from the schools about site selection. It's down to 2. The select people, I know I did it when I was one, shortened the term of the lease agreement at the Winthrop property with the school district, encouraging them to use more of the Cutler site. I know other boards and committees have been talking about this for a long period of time, so it's nothing new. We're not trying to be avant-garde or anything. But we think now is the time to put some money in place to plan for, this is town property. What would the town do with this? And I think back again on my library experience where I was involved in that for a long period of time, and it was generally successful. The library was fine, but I think the biggest mistake I made was not looking at the value of the old library. That was a town asset, and it wasn't used as part of the equation in what we were thinking about doing. And the town was like, well, we'll figure it out later and kind of sort out what it's going to be somehow. And eventually, now it's the lovely senior center that gets used all the time, and it's a beautiful building, and CPC puts money into it, and it complements the architecture of the community house, and it's a lot of really great things that come of that. Well, I see a similar analogy here, where the schools are going to be going forward with new schools, very expensive. There's going to be huge amounts of debate about all that. One thing that happens, though, is that groups will start coming along with their own ideas. Oh, that's what should happen here. No, it's got to be a certain use, or no, it's not going to change in some way. And there'll be ideas from all over the place. Years ago, I've already seen a plan for what Winthrop should be when it's not Winthrop. It's already shared. I saw it once by a local architect. And that didn't come from what I knew of any public input process. So let me describe how the HTC has come up with what we're suggesting happens, which is building a community for tomorrow. Creating a vibrant and inclusive community has social and tax benefits for our town. Now is the time to start planning for the use of the Winthrop School property. Hamilton faces new and unreasonable zoning demands from the state, i.e. all these housing units that are being demanded of us that are near the train station, as well as the opportunity for new tax revenue from residential and commercial uses. Winthrop's inclusive community planning and rezoning would solicit resident input on exactly what would be allowed and how it would look, this helping tie together the limitation of other significant town plans. For example, the new town master plan. We heard a lot of bits of that. What's to preserve, what's to do. The joint HCC Town $5 million grant we're just talking about for downtown development, for traffic calming, pedestrian safety. Patton Park has its own master plan, which is part of what, Rick didn't mention this, but in the design, we got a volunteer landscape architect to help with the design of this pocket park, and we took the results of the Patton Park master plan and tried to mirror that. So it starts to feel like one downtown area that people don't drive too fast through. Anyway, I diverted for a moment. So therefore, much more improved welcome to Hamilton perception with the HDC efforts on this pocket park. So we're going to ask you to make a decision to ask Joe to put $150,000 in next year's budget to plan for the reuse of that. So there's two parts to this. One is me do a little bit. I'll close at the end. Emil from the planning board is going to talk about something called form-based code, which is in the end creates a visual representation of what it's like. But I'd like to let you know some of the reasons why we need to do it now. Why do we need to do this now? Because we don't fund this now, and then maybe it happens in FY26, and then maybe we get the results in FY27. we're way down the road. We're just way down the road when there's already public angst about what's going on. Our view is we need to take control of town-owned property. This is our property. Hamilton there's about 77 acres under control that are tax-free for the school uses, of which 70 acres are in Hamilton. That's a good contribution to the school. I'm all for it. Love the schools. All 4 of my kids went to Winthrop. But we have an opportunity for a very large chunk of that to be back on the tax rolls. And we heard that in the master plan as, it's an issue. What are you gonna do? So I think that's important now. And as I mentioned, my library example, I think thinking about schools without thinking about what's if it winds up at Cutler as as the consolidated school, which if you ask, I've talked to every director at the schools. I've gone, if we consolidated those schools, we'd save some money. But if we don't think about the plans for Winthrop, I think we're doing a disservice to the whole town discussion about what the right decision is going to be in the end. So Emil's going to talk about what is form-based code, which is something that the planning board, and we'd use a consultant with really good project management and communication skills to come through and try to encourage the community contribution to say, what is the future of the Winthrop school site? And then we'll ask you to ask Joe to include some money for that.
I just want to give just one brief introduction here. Marnie Crouch, I'm chair of the planning board. I just want everyone to know that when Emil speaks, he can speak with authority. He's been an architect for 50 years, but more importantly, he was chair of 2 committees in Simsbury, Connecticut. One was the Architectural Review Board, and another was a board that considered appeals from building issues. But more importantly, he introduced form-based coding to Simsbury, Massachusetts, Connecticut, I apologize, Simsbury, Connecticut, and it was incredibly successful there. And he also introduced it to a very large site where the Hartford Insurance Company was relocating. So he's very knowledgeable about this and believes very strongly that it could really tie in all the components of our discussion here tonight in a very reasonable and good way that would be applicable to the town long into the future, 30 or 50 years into the future.
Thank you, Marnie. Marnie, can I hire you for a hype person when I get up to speak at some point? Appreciate it.
Where's this walk-on music?
Yeah, right?
I did not ask for that. I feel as though I have to say something really important now.
I saw y'all practicing it in the
Oh.
Part of the sale.
Yeah.
Joe, can I
I
share
just
this?
made you co-host so that you can share.
Yeah, thank you.
Hamilton?
This is Hamilton. Very interesting discussion tonight, and I can see there's a heavy theme going on here, because then this is a perfect ending for you, because it is a way to really tie everything together in a very neat and well organized way that will have a lot of benefits also when you go to get funding. If you can produce HTC has already done it, but if you can really produce a cohesive plan to solicit funds, it goes a long way in getting a higher success rate. So this again has multiple benefits down the line. I was asked to talk very briefly about, so I'm going to keep this very, very short, but about form-based codes, and there's a lot to it, and if you wanted to get more detail, I can do it some other time, but this, of course, is town center. I took this off and...
Can I interrupt you for just a second? I know you're just on a roll, but you had can't speak tonight. You had shared a larger slide deck with me earlier today. Would you mind, I can share it with the whole board if you don't mind later, just because you said there's more information in there and I don't want to... You've done a lot
I
of.
cut it down to 9 slides.
But I'll share your presentation with the board so they can have more information, I guess, after the meeting, later on.
You go through yours now.
Go through your shorter deck, but I'll give them the full deck.
That's great.
So-
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Thanks. The first decision is what is downtown? And as was suggested by Scott, what the town has to do is work with a consultant, and actually it's a consulting team. It's a multidisciplinary team that will come in and examine the town in a very connected way. Because a town as a functioning system impacts the town in many ways, in all aspects, from the public realm, which was discussed by Scott, the streets, sidewalks, that feeds into circulation, into particular traffic issues. Asbury is one, and of course, Walnut Street could not be a worse situation with the train running right through it. The train, in fact, just bifurcates the complete town in a way that's caused many problems. And so the first thing would be what is the town center? What is the delineation of the town center? And in some discussions, the different activities or uses that are going on, of course, are the civic up at Patton Park on the top, the education, which is Winthrop, whatever the disposition of that will be down the line. Public safety area right here is, the Council on Aging, and it is the public safety buildings. And then there's a strip of residential on Carriage Lane right here, right in the center. And then the existing downtown district, business district area. Everything surrounding it, 1A, R1A, current zoning. Now, the reason for tying everything in a large way, whether it's all done in a short time or a long time, it's to be able to make a very cohesive downtown. Certain issues like parking, for example. Well, I'll go to the next slide. The town center district. So some of the issues and the opportunities in the downtown that really require a cohesive analysis. First of all, you want to retain the historic and small town character. That's one of the things I think that's coming out of the master plan. Create economic opportunities in soft and transitional areas, and those are areas that maybe are underutilized, underperforming for whatever reason. Create residential pockets. 3A was mentioned earlier. That's going to be a huge problem for the town to work out, and this is an ideal way to be able to incorporate some of the thinking in how to resolve that issue in a very effective way. You do not want to put it all in one spot, for example, if there is additional residential, and you do want residential in your downtown. You need to disperse it in a way that is very effective. Manage traffic flow better. I mentioned the intersections. Increase parking options. Where do you want to park if, as was suggested earlier, I think by Scott, that when you want to park once and walk to multiple places, so parking is essential, and why you need to consider this in one picture, because you don't want unnecessary parking, and one of the benefits of doing a study like this is that you can actually disperse it in different places around the town. Improve connectivity both north and south, east and west. The opportunities not with Patton Park are to connect it to what is right across the street, which has a potential, if it does come under development, the school property, in making perhaps Patton Park the town green in some way. I think the connectivity is going to be important to make it easy for people across the street. Excuse me. And the idea of designing parcel by parcel one at a time is that your thinking stops at the property line. You don't go beyond that. And something like a downtown, connectivity is really key. Getting people to move around, getting paths, traffic, and so forth. And then you want to enhance the safety at critical intersections. So those are just some of the many things to talk about. A lot of this slide presentation now is just taken from a state. This was the Citizens Guide to Form-Based Codes. The state put this out as a slideshow. This is available online if you want to look at 60 slides of form-based codes, but I'm not doing that tonight. But I just took some of their thinking, and so what are they? It's a tool. All all zoning regulations are tools. It's what you have to work with in a town. But this is a tool especially for shaping pedestrian-scale mixed-use and small-town environments. It's often used in village-style development or neo-traditional planning. It's more concerned with placement and form of buildings than their use, and it's a response to undesirable sprawl, urban sprawl. This is so what are the concepts? Again, it's a shared vision. It begins with public forums, public workshops, and planning and visioning. This town is no stranger to visioning. But it would, in this case, take on a lot of the previous studies that have happened before, and also conduct new ones that pertain to a downtown area. Priority is designated on form rather than use. Conventional zoning is basically use-based, and it does have a couple of form features like setbacks and building heights and so forth, but those are very blunt instruments, never used in planning, but they are what actually impacts our neighborhoods. What you see on the right there, form-based code gives a better design control, like building types, build two lines, facades, build out percentage, and so forth. It's a much finer grained zoning regulation. So we do have right now a zoning regulation that is basically use-based, but it's very crude and it's not good for planning. In fact, it's the answer to that question. Well, if we all know what we would like to have, why don't we build it? And that's an interesting question that really started this whole movement 20 years ago or so. And what it comes down to is the zoning regulations, in many cases, prohibits you from getting the things you want in your community. It's not legal. And it's interesting to go in some towns and walk around and just look at everything that is, in fact, illegally put there because it predated the codes. And so in a way, it's an old new idea because or it's a new old idea, and it was the way this country used to build its towns pre-World War II, before zoning impact. The zoning came about in the 1920s, but it took decades before the impact of all the construction that based its work on the zoning regs actually came into existence to show people whether this was really working or not. And it was pretty clear the results were not very good, not what people had expected. So what are the components within this? There are 6 parts to the entire code. There's the regulating plan, which essentially is a street plan where everything is delineated on that plan as to setbacks and building locations and placement and so forth. And with every zoning, there's a plan, and then there are standards. So the public space standards, again, this a lot of what I heard tonight, again from Scott, was the public spaces are the streets and the sidewalks and the lanterns and the pocket parks and so forth. That's all considered part of what's called the public realm. And the thing that form-based codes do is they organize that, and then they organize private development so that the buildings that are created there actually form the spaces on each of those sites. And that's the critical part that does not occur in conventional zoning. So you get building form standards, again, which are building size, heights, relationship to the street, and those kinds of things that come under that. Other standards are optional: building type, architecture, landscaping, and so on. Many towns go to architecture as a standard because they wanted to preserve a particular look. Now, just to be clear, this is not about creating a museum piece in downtown Hamilton, because I think a lot of contemporary building really should happen here, but done in a way that supports the historic content that you do see here in town. The scale, the positioning, the patterns, and so forth can be done with a modern vocabulary, not necessarily molding pieces and columns and so forth. The administrative mechanisms are part of the code. That's for the, in this case, probably a planning board to administer the code, and a glossary. That really is it. So it's really, the only differences are every zoning reg has a plan, but what this has is space planning then, the public spaces, building form standards, and other standards that could happen. So why do they make sense? Well, number one, it gives you what you want rather than what you don't want. What this essentially does is turn the conventional zoning backwards that we go through now. So many projects that come here, it's really a developer who comes, a project or a site becomes available, a contractor or a developer figures out what he wants to do within the code on that site and produces a drawing for approval, and usually it's special permit. What this does, this particular process does, is flip that on its head. Rather than going through kind of a long process, and in the end, if it doesn't satisfy the planning board, then it's a good chance it might be denied. What this particular code, with the form-based code, what happens in the beginning is the town convenes to decide what it wants there on the site in the first place. It very carefully creates the codes to do it. And then once all of that's drafted and approved, has gone through all the commissions and the voting and so forth, that becomes essentially an as of right, so that a developer, the hard thinking and the real difficult stuff is done up front, and it's done within the town. And it's made so that if a developer wants to do it, it's a prescriptive code. It's a tight code to fit, but it gets it's a streamlined process to go through the approval. Developers like it a lot because it takes away some of the unknowns, the unpredictability of it. People in the town like it because they know at the outset what they're going to get. It's predictable. There's a certainty to it that satisfies a lot of people. Number two, form-based codes encourage public participation. That's key at the outset. 3, codes enable incremental growth. These build-outs in a town the size of Hamilton, for example, or Simsbury, where I came from, it had there's probably a 30-year build-out before properties come under construction. And the way it's usually done is that pre-existing properties in an area that adopts a form-based code and replaces essentially the underlying code there now, once that gets replaced, it's not retroactive. The individual owners are not obliged to do anything to their buildings, but continue to use them the way they have done, until a point where they want to do major improvements or substantial changes to the site. Then they have to comply on that site with the current codes. That's to create, again, some order in a long-term way for the town. And again, the idea of having a plan in place, knowing what it's going to look like in the end, it's then a matter of time when do these properties change to fill that out. They work well in established communities. In other words, the idea of redevelopment you don't want to build on unused sites, but you do want to build on used sites. And usually what happens when you start a form-based code, part of the visioning process, you decide what is it that you want to keep and retain, what is it that you want to change for, and what do you want to, but essentially keep it, but change the way it is a little bit. And then finally, what would you rather see that would be better than that on the site? Those are essentially the 3 things you have to decide. They're easier to understand because they're very graphic. And of course, the old expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words. They are enforceable. And again, number 7, it's a streamlined process with an as-of-right condition. Again, it's something that's really desirable. It gets what the town wants to see. The projects become what the town wants to see in the long run, and it's what the public would like to see because they were part of the process. And this can be changed periodically if you find that the situation or the economy changes in some manner. These are relatively easy to change codes. Now this gets to sort of what are the next steps. So how do we create the form-based codes? The idea is to write up an RFP from the town. RFP as distinguished from a bidding process. looking for a low bid. Because with an RFP, the town wants to keep the advantage of making this a qualifications-based, not a cost-based kind of performance. If you write an RFP, distribute it in a very wide network outside the area, it could even be national, and if you get responses, you should get a lot of responses from folks, planners who do this kind of work, and they would put together their ideas. They would respond in a way showing what their approach might be. So what you're going to essentially do is give them a list of products. What do you want to have coming out of this whole process? And they would figure out their approach to create it. And would then go through the evaluation process to evaluate what the best choice would be for the town. It may not necessarily be the lowest bidder, but it could be one that has the closest qualifications. You'll ask for examples of what they had done of a similar nature, for example. So they're going to start with an analysis of existing conditions and an inventory. The public visioning or workshops will be set up. They'll create then the regulating plan, the town standards, and the architectural standards, and it all gets illustrated and written up in a form. It'll be taken to the town for town's input. They'll be working with the planning board, with the select board on this. It'll get undoubtedly changed a little bit, modified, and then it goes through an approval process. So that it's pretty straightforward, but it's a timeline that takes probably 18 months from beginning to end, from the time you're going to write the code to the time it's ultimately adopted. That at least was the case. The latest one I've heard of written in Massachusetts was in Littleton. Littleton Commons was the name of the project. And an interesting project, and a town not unsimilar to Hamilton in many ways. The town of 10,000, its downtown was roughly a half mile, which is what this town is from the top of Patton Park to the rail station, which is actually an ideal size for a very small town in many ways because it is walkable completely. Littleton Common is a good one to look at, and it was done fairly recently. And the form-based codes now exist across the country in hundreds or even thousands across the country. So it has taken off in many ways. For another very important reason, it's a great way to start to adopt a lot of the smart growth principles, and which are, again, much more difficult with standard or conventional codes. So another reason to do that. So that's my brief introduction to form-based code. So this is the area. It's roughly 60 acres right in the center of town that I think, in my opinion, and we've talked about this as a board, and I think our planning board has agreed to it, that the boundary should exist throughout the entire site. Now, just a cautionary note, people will hear form-based codes and building as much as you can, and it does not have to be that way at all. If you want to build a really small hamlet-type place, use a form-based code. If you want a really dense downtown area, use a form-based code, because it's the one that gives you the most flexibility. It's the most accurate tool to create what you want. And I would probably say, from what I understand of the master plan, and having been part of that a little bit at the outset, that this town is not going to grow enormously. I mean, it has other limitations, that wastewater treatment and so infrastructure. But that's just, anybody who raises objections to that, there's a huge economic benefit to maximizing what this can do and still remain a town that has the charm and character that it does in its downtown area. So again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You said the planning board believes that the boundary should exist throughout the entire area. Do you mean the entire 60-acre area? So you're not just looking at, for instance, at the Winthrop school site, you're looking at the 60 acres to include rezoning or changing the zoning in the existing downtown?
Yeah, what I'm thinking of, if you look at writing a code, I think the Winthrop site should be considered part of the downtown area, the downtown district, because it's the importance of it and the potential for getting some economic benefit out of that part of that. I think that would be extraordinary. And then the availability of the park right across the street. Again, not that you're going to build it. The park is probably going to stay civic and an open park because people want that. But there are ways that it can be connected better. And another important thing there is at Asbury intersection. If the Patton Park becomes more of a part of the downtown, it will be considered in the traffic study in the downtown, and how do you manage that particular area? It's a very, as was brought out earlier, it's a pretty unsafe intersection, and whether it's done with, like an oval
Like a
roundabout
roundy
or something like that. There are just a lot of options to deal with traffic, to slow it down around there and enable people to cross the street in an easy way. The other thing is getting people from the Willow Street area across into the Bay Road area because of the tracks, and I guess there are a couple of options there to allow people to move across that without going to each end and then using the roads. So the idea was, what I delineated here was the red line around would be the eventual coded area. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all code. What will happen is that there will be different districts within this code that would have different functions, different uses. Some might be mixed use, some might be more residential, some might be more commercial. Civic will play a big part in that, where the parks go, the pocket parks, because they need to get distributed. And then movement, circulation through that. So what I was saying, Joe, is this is a huge opportunity for the town, and if you're going to do one study, one chance to do it right, I think it ought to be included. It's my opinion, and
Yes, would have done, but that's perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Any questions, comments from the board?
So we're trying to package like a lot of things together here, right?
We got a lot of stuff, yeah.
A Winthrop site.
Yeah.
Try to package maybe a form-based code, and then also what about like the Section 3A guidelines for the state? Is that part of this, all the same process?
Absolutely, that would be taken into account. Now, that's a half mile from my understanding of it. I think it's a sort of a moving target, frankly, my understanding of the 3A housing. But in other words, what's codified at this point is compliance with a 15 unit per acre requirement in substantial areas or some reasonable size
Minimum of
area.
49 acres.
Well, if you do the 731 units. I'm not sure how that's all going to work out. What I'm saying is it just happens to come at a time when the town is thinking of planning its downtown. So it's natural that it should become part of the study and given as a problem for the consultants to work with the town to draw some conclusions on that. I can't predict what that final number is. 48, 49 acres does not sound reasonable to me, but.
Same.
In black and white.
But we've got it right there, right? 60.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you have to build on it, just means you have to identify.
You have to identify 49 acres that would have that, that density of housing.
Right, and we're sharing a portion of that with Wenham as well, right?
But does
Because-
all that housing need to be a half a mile from the station?
No, the 20%.
I thought it was 20%.
20% has to, and then the rest.
If we identify
Yes,
49
yeah,
acres
yeah.
within a half mile, that's what we're going to get.
So if 20% is, I don't know, 150,
Yeah.
something like, then you can get a lot of that in the downtown, maybe.
I think that's what we
So-
go
You
for,
have to
right?
do it, it's just you have to give the ability if people wanted to do it.
It has
It's
to
not
be
gonna happen.
It has to be zoned for as of right.
We lay out, well, this is a whole
Right, it's
meeting.
a whole different
and
discussion, but
10
yeah.
meetings,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I don't.
If you lay out that area for that, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Over
I think. I
hundreds
don't know
of years,
either.
people
Nothing-
selling
I
their
don't know what's
houses.
codified and
Right.
whether it's the
Someone's got to sell their
150.
house. I mean, that's what you realize, someone's got to sell their property. It doesn't just happen. Someone's got to sell their property,
Yeah.
someone's got to buy it.
So we heard the HDC,
Right, yeah.
they're talking to
Right.
people, I'm sure Dodge would, if that came into play, boom, I'm just saying, we have to,
Right.
this is a strategic discussion. But I'm just confused a little bit, Emily. So, because I would love to hear the planning boards, and I guess this is it. Do you need form-based code planning, or do we have regulations and codes today to make an assessment in how we might want to start looking at what that whole district looks like today? I mean, is one inclusive of the other, or do we need form-based coding to even have that discussion? That's,
Well,
we have codes and regulations. we have.
Yes, right.
Winthrop committee, could we just rezone that and
Yeah.
then put it in that?
We could
and use
extend
that
our
coverage?
overlay district.
Yeah,
Exactly,
you
that-
could do that.
So is the 150, I'm sorry, an ask from the HDC specifically for the repurpose, as I think it was originally stated, or is it a consulting to implement form-based?
Form-based in the entire downtown was my understanding of that, yeah.
Once again, basically, the AC is recommending that we take the study up. I don't think they're gonna run the study. They're
No, they're not gonna, I don't think they're gonna run it.
gonna recommend that we.
I want to be involved in it because it's part of their.
Work ahead of time,
bailiwick,
be
their
proactive,
downtown.
right? So they're
It's to begin a process that is writing an RFP, soliciting interested parties to come to town, help the town out, do the professional planning for it. And, having been involved in 3 or 4 of them now, it's a really exciting process, and you get a lot of interest. On some of them, the design team comes to town, will set up a permanent facility there where they're working on the process, and people can sort of drop in and out just to look at what's going on, and then they have periodic meetings. So it's a terrific process. And people will be engaged because they can see that their appearance matters to the process. So, okay.
Scott, did you want to say something?
I do. Thank you. That was excellent.
That was really good.
And I appreciate all the work the planning board's been doing.
Thank you.
The community house for attending. This is a big impact for them. They're a massive impact. They're kind of an anchor tenant in the world of the HDC. So being here is really important to us. We appreciate it. The neighbors, the businesses that are here. For the HDC fulfill its role. We're only doing it with the neighbors and the businesses and the community house. What you just heard, I think, is an ability for us to control our destiny. And that's really important. And why we need to do it now is, and we'll talk about a 18-month or so process. If we don't fund this for next, just so everybody knows, town funding process, we have a town meeting in April, and then next July, August, then the next year starts. If we don't get this in the budget now, it gets into maybe the next year budget, and then it's a year and a half before stuff is done. Well, at the same time, all these other activities are going on, and we've heard directly, we haven't got all the debrief from the state, but certainly from the consultants and analysts, like, by doing more of this kind of planning, our $5 million grant application would have been farther along as well, because we're considering all the impacts that are going on here. The MBTA zoning rules, if we don't start driving and attacking how we're going to go after those with how we're controlling it, then I think we have a much better case when we're coming forward with our plan. So things like you heard Chad talk about us approaching the Dodge Tree folks, and maybe sometime, whatever, remember all the drama with the Palazzolo property and what happened there? Well, we didn't have anything like this type of concept that was going on. It wasn't an HDC project, but HDC is very interested in acquiring that kind of property, turn into more or different productive use. It wound up being successful at Willow Flats, but it was rough. The one neighbor left. Not everybody was totally happy. So this is a very intensive public process. And if one thing I'm sure Bill could attest is, especially with the master plan, we need really excellent project management and communication skills in a third party to help gather all that input and put it together in a really good way, because it's going to be contentious. It's going to be. That's going to be part of what's going to be happening. But the HDC, we feel like we need to be pushing this ahead, because if this isn't happening, the other things that we're trying to do and tie together downtown are not leveraged as well. So we're very interested in what's happening. We want to support what's going on. That's why we put it on the agenda with you all, and we want to help the money get to help the planning board do it. And I know the FinCom is looking very much forward to, hey, how do we start thinking about what's happening in the future? And we want to help communicate that to all these different boards and committees. So I think having $150,000 earmarked in your next year's budget to support this form-based code. For the way I understand, we can set a capped number. It's not like, well, we just say this is a number and that's what you gotta live with, which is one of the concerns I know Joe has had, is like, hey, we start down some project planning stuff and all of a sudden it's more money than we thought it was gonna be. And from what I understand, it doesn't have to be that way. But I think if we don't start this planning as soon as possible and getting into next year's budget, waiting again another year and then 2 more years before we have results from it, is a lot of angst and drama in our town that we can try to help mitigate by doing something that's very community-based, that brings in the community house, the businesses, the neighbors that are all around there. So our ask to you is that you, Select Board, make a decision to ask Joe to include $150,000 in next year's budget for this.
Thanks, Scott. Comments, questions, thoughts?
I mean, I think it makes sense. I just don't know what the next step is, right? I don't know if we go right to the 150,000, or is there like an intermediate step? So I'm just trying to figure out, is there stuff we can do?
Yeah,
So that's my only question. It's like, what do you, I agree you gotta do the work, to take time. I just don't know if that's the next logical step. So I think we need to debate that a little bit, talk about it a little bit more, but I need to think about more information.
I think moving forward in some way is the next step. We've done so much visioning and planning and consultant work over the last 8 years with different things, and now we've got Patton Park master plan. We're finishing our own town master plan, which includes a lot of these things. I think, I'm not sure about the 150K, if it's too little or too much, or, you know, we don't know if we have that site open yet.
Right.
You know, that's another factor. I think once we know a little, Marnie, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, I just make a comment. The whole issue with the Winthrop School site, if there is a form-based code, it's not impossible for the Winthrop School to stay the Winthrop School, because eventually it may not be the Winthrop School. And then there could be a plan for mixed development there. And then I would just add, with respect to the 3A component here, there's so many misconceptions about that. It's a sledgehammer that the Commonwealth has used, but the number of units that's been proposed for Hamilton is, in my opinion, an impossibility, because we simply do not have the infrastructure. And so with respect to the form-based code, I commend the HDC for the work that they've already done, and you're a very eloquent speaker on behalf of the planning for the HDC, both you and Rick. So some of that work would be integrated into the form-based code. I would assume that the consultants would make use of the study that the HDC commissioned in support of their grant application. So that there's pieces that have been done. But I think that the whole notion that Bay Road could support 731 units being dwelling units, and all the traffic associated with that kind of development is just, it's an impossibility. So I think that with the form-based code, we could show the Commonwealth our good faith by planning a mixed-use development for the Winthrop School site, showing some high level of multifamily density, but at a level that can be handled by the existing infrastructure. And by that, I really think it's the 2-lane Bay Road. And so I think with the 3A, you have to show that you have this by right area, but there's no mandate that any of those units have to be built.
Right, you just have to give the opportunity if it
You just
comes.
have to have the opportunity. And so it's my understanding that Patrick reached out to the Commonwealth, and they did not voice opposition to potentially marrying the 3A and the form-based code. And I know that John Whitten also shared that view. Now, there are many issues related to that, but I think that the form-based code is a way of ameliorating any potential disruption in the town and also maintaining the town's character while going through the steps that the Commonwealth requires. And again, there are lots of other issues that have to be discussed in that, but I wanted to throw that out because I think the form-based code is a really logical way of integrating work that's already been done, and the planning board has already got an RFP draft before it that we need to discuss and maybe amend to add some qualifications with respect to looking at the 3A. But we're on the way, and we just need now a green light if we're going to continue those efforts.
All right, thank you, Marnie. That's good input.
I think this is now the second time, Emma, that you've done this, and I think it's great. And my challenge has nothing to do with form-based coding. It's more the order of operations here based on, before we could do anything with Winthrop, we'd have to determine whether it was or was not going to be the site of the school. So, but let's take that out of it. We then have to convince the town to change the zoning because we couldn't put commercial there before we did that. We've already got very strong opposition from the neighborhood. We now have a website and a marketing campaign against the school building because they want nothing there except for a school or residential. And my concern is that if we go ahead and put forth $150,000 to do a plan for this, it signals that we have in fact made decisions and are moving forward with something that hasn't moved forward yet. And I agree that we want to get ahead of it, but I think we need $150,000 for the lawyers. Honestly, we're at that place where we have strong, well-funded opposition to anything going there. We have a lot of well-distributed misinformation about how far along we are with the site for the new school. We have a narrative around mega schools, and I'm just concerned that if we prioritize and throw into that conversation commercial development at the Winthrop site and doing this plan, that we kill the school before it has a chance to get off the ground.
I think those are all very legitimate concerns. And that's the beauty of the public process, is trying to act in a logical, thoughtful manner. I think this doesn't presuppose that this is actually going to happen. What we're asking is that the select board, via the town manager, set aside that budget pending the decision on what happens, with the Winthrop. I think you can solve that problem. I know we'd like to start it earlier to address the 3A, but I think you can form, no, that's probably a poor word using form-based code, but you can structure it as saying the town is prepared to engage in a thoughtful public planning process when a decision is made about the reuse of the Winthrop site, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to approve the money and we're putting out an RFP and we're going to start the planning process in July 1st. I think
Would we need to do that now? 150 could reasonably be, could be a free cash decision at the time, or right? I worry
That was my question, do we need to actually put on the budget?
This level of process,
We do plenty
I
of
think,
studies.
signals.
Right. No, I think that's absolutely a great idea. I just think this discussion is very important to have so that at least Joe and the select board understand sort of what we're trying to accomplish here and where it might fit in the order of decision-making, so that when and if that decision is made, you go, okay, we know what we want to do next, we know where we're going, and we have an RFP, we have a scope of services, and we have a budget set aside to deal with that issue when and if it becomes an issue. It's just being prepared for the eventuality of something needing to happen on that site, rather than reacting, oh, they made the decision, now what do we do? Because forewarned is forearmed. And as you said, there is strong opposition to everything we do in this town.
But I guess if the school's gonna take 2 or 3 years to be built, we could start the plan for Winthrop won't be vacated for 3 years.
Right.
Do we need, I'm asking genuinely, like, is the urgency to get this master plan literally in 2024?
No, no.
Okay.
I think.
2028.
Just so, just so.
We're not
That's
earmarking
when-
$150,000 3 years in advance,
Meaning
right?
that's when you
So
would
I'm
sell.
just trying to clarify
So,
and ask.
so my question is to the select board, what's the decision date for the school committee to make a determination on the reuse of the Winthrop site in their schedule? Do they know?
Well, there's going to be a conversation between the school building committee and the select board on December 18th.
Okay.
After that, things will start to become a little bit clearer.
Okay, so maybe you don't make a, you know, and this is a decision you guys can make, but I think, at least in the mind, as you said, Carolyn, maybe it's out of free cash when and if it becomes time to make that decision.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd rather not raise it appropriated on the taxes. I'd rather make it a one-time expense out of free cash or some other.
Oh, absolutely,
mechanism, right?
absolutely.
Like we've done in the past for consultants.
I think we just wanted to raise this issue because it is so critical to the downtown, so that the select board can make an informed decision when that time frame comes and says, we need to make we need to make a decision, so you can speak intelligently and say, we have a plan, or we have a plan to get a plan, and engage in a very public process to determine the future of that site. And we know what it is, we've heard what it is, we know the approximate cost, we know the approximate time frame. We can give the green light to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think judging from no one really speaking vehemently against it, we're all in support of the direction we're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, can we take a look at the RFP and the scope of work? Is that something you have already, or?
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have to take a look
Absolutely.
at that.
Yeah, the more informed you guys are in terms of what it looks like, the better, you know, the outcome will be. So this is.
And we may also, as time goes on and we figure out whether it's Winthrop site, Cutler site, or wherever else the feasibility group comes to with us, we may have a more ballpark idea whether it's 150K, 100K, 200K, whatever that fee
Yeah,
may be.
and I think as Scott mentioned and Emil has mentioned, the same thing is you just establish a budget and they have to develop a scope to that budget rather than saying, well, it's about this number. No, this is the number.
Right.
That's it. You work to that number, and there's no change orders coming in this.
That's true to a point, but I think that one of the things that happens with an RFP too is that all these consultants want to get paid. They know what they want their bottom line to be when they're finished with the project. So things that come out of these scopes as they develop them are the number of public meetings that they have, how much money they put into communication. Is that social media based, or is it just paper? All that stuff can help or hurt.
Right.
Depending how robust the scope is.
Right.
Can help or hurt the actual process of developing. So we have to be careful that the number we put forward is going to be a number that can be justified for a good plan, not just somebody meeting our dollar amount.
Right, and we know what we're getting back.
Well,
For a fair RFP, everybody has to have the opportunity to price the same scope.
Well, having been in public realm for many, many years, I know enough to ask for enough money. And how to write a scope and how to manage a project. So I feel that number is sufficient to make that happen. And in fact, Emil has taken the preliminary scope and has talked to some firms to see if we could get any kind of interest. As we refine that scope, we can, put it out and say, hey, what can we get back for this? But I think just use this as a number for now for discussion purposes. I don't think it should change much, wildly more than 10 or 15 or, percent above that, because it just shouldn't, and it, for what you're trying to do.
It's good. And this is only applicable in the downtown district area? We wouldn't utilize this form-based code across
Just
all
in
of
that 6
Hamilton?
acres.
Every time I try and sit down. I think it's important to focus on one discrete area, go through the process, see how it works, see what we get. in terms of public participation and what the town wants, and actually see if we can get it and, you know, enacted and passed by town meeting, and actually engage, if it is Winthrop or other sites in the downtown, and so people get comfortable with, okay, this isn't like a dramatic change that's gonna, you know,
And then they'll come back in 4 years and ask for more money to do the rest of the town.
well, if it works out right, then
That's good, yeah.
you've got a test case that says, hey, you know, people are happy with this, then we ought to do it in another section of town. But I like the incremental process as opposed to, you know, let's, you know, that's too much, too fast, too soon.
In Emil's, the project he mentioned in Littleton is worth looking at. I've seen that project, and it's, if you haven't seen
That
it.
was my point. I think like the next step should be hearing about, maybe have people come in and talk to us about, before we vote on a budget, have people come and talk to us about form-based code who've done it, or hear from what we're up against for the consensus in town of why people are against this. But before we get, so I think we have to start the planning. I don't think the next step is the 150. I think it's a lot of things we need to do, so.
Yeah, I think this discussion has been very helpful, at least for, you know, for us to get this out on the table and discussion purposes, and I understand timing and on how that all works, so I think we're pretty happy with the outcome of this. Would that be a...
Yeah, I think so too.
Everybody go like this.
You better say yes, Emil, or I'm gonna have trouble outside. Yeah, I mean, you know, the sooner that you get clarity, the sooner that we can make a decision to what this looks like.
Let me just say, very briefly, it was actually a good suggestion. You can actually invite some of these people to give you a presentation on it, get a different viewpoint. You know, my experiences with having worked on several of them, and in the years I put in doing town planning stuff, that the critical thing is to get the right people to do it. That's number one. Your consultants have to be first rate, and you have to know what they do, be able to read it, and understand who the best choices are. That is critical. And getting a wide enough cast a net, I mean, I would do it nationwide, because fellow I worked with was out in Austin, Texas.
I say there's so much form-based on the West Coast and stuff like that, too. So
Oh, yeah, it's all over the country, so it's sort of a known product now, so. But I don't see an urgency on that. I mean, I can understand. I don't think anybody's looking for a decision tonight on this, but certainly, the longer you do wait, the higher the cost is going to be, obviously. But to begin the process, I think would make a lot of sense. With just giving a positive direction so we can complete all the preliminary stuff.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, any other comments from the board?
No,
Any?
thanks for the HCC coming in tonight.
Yeah, thank you,
That was an
HGC.
excellent
This is
update.
very
Really good topics.
informative and helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, do you need to adjourn your meeting?
Yes, we do. I'll entertain a motion from our HDC board to adjourn the November 20th HDC meeting. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, HDC members. Thank you, Community House members. See you, Jen. See you, Chad. All right, we skipped around a little bit on our agenda. We have a special town meeting wrap-up, review, and discussion with ourselves, the select board, and our town manager. I'll tee it off and just say, I think we had a very successful town meeting. I think we logged about an hour, start to finish.
Yep.
Not a ton on the agenda, but enough on the agenda that it was worthwhile. I would say that the 7 o'clock meeting, I think, worked out really well, looking at the numbers.
The largest vote was like 120?
Yeah. We had about 120 folks, give or take, and that's kind of what we average for STMs. unless there's a really big controversy going on.
How did that compare to, I know we've done it in the evenings years ago. Did that compare as a more, about the same?
About the same.
Yeah.
Bill, would you say the same? As far, when we used to have the meetings at night, the attendance, I would say, was pretty close to what we had, depending on what kind of hot button issue was.
I mean, I think when the meetings were at night, the quorum was for annual was 150, so, and the annual is at night, so you had bigger crowds, but no, it was, you know, it was good, you know.
Did you hear anything from anybody about?
I haven't gotten any phone calls or emails with anybody that was upset about it or not. I mean, I heard there was some kind of grumblings before from some folks, but I think with the brevity of the meeting, I think it helped people not be so upset about the time maybe, because we didn't, I mean, when we used to have annual at night, there were several years I know where we carried over to another night. You know, there was always a big hubbub at about 11 o'clock or so to end it and continue on the next night. And then, you know, people trying to find a babysitter or whatnot, or just show up the second night was problematic at times. So.
And what about the not printing the thing? Did you see any pushback?
Nothing negative. I mean, I had a couple positive comments, people liked it. No, didn't hear from anybody. Did have a couple people come to town hall, mostly older folks who said, you know, I don't have a printer, can you help me get a copy? And we said, sure. Printed them on a copy, and they took it and they were happy. Didn't have, I heard a couple of people say, oh, having it at night isn't gonna make some of the older folks not wanna drive. So we immediately let anybody that asked that question know that the Council on Aging was offering rides. I don't even think they wound up providing it, because nobody called to schedule. So we did everything we could to make sure that we removed any of those obstacles, and nobody complained to us about it. You know, I heard some positive, again, about the change in having people just get the small mailer with the QR code and the website, and they could download their own, and a lot of people did that. A lot of people did it on their phone.
And if you can just refresh myself, I can't remember, and everybody listening, how much we had been spending on mailing the warrant.
We've been spending an average of $12,000 to $14,000 per town meeting on printing and mailing the warrant. We spent about $600 to print those cards.
So 30,000 versus less than 2,000 for 2 town meetings.
That is crazy.
That's substantial.
Excellent.
Nice job. Mr. Buller, any comments?
No, I was pretty much exhausted after, you know, after working so hard. No, I thought it went very well, and that's all I mean to do. You know, the back of the house, the people that helped set it up. I mean, people should realize that there's a lot of work from the school employees and students to help set it up, and they're very accommodating, and so they deserve a lot of credit. So,
kudos to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think having that clicker is the best thing we ever got.
The clicker has changed the game for us.
Just be pieces of paper?
Yeah, well, we would do it
you
just,
hold it up.
we would hold it up,
Count 'em.
and it would be
Tellers.
basically a volume
Dials.
thing. If you heard more yays than nays, or if it was
Count 'em.
close, you would count.
Oh,
Get the
y'all.
And you'd
tellers.
do, a teller would be each aisle, they would go down and count, and then they would compare all their
Like
numbers.
5 or 10 minutes
and-
per vote,
Yeah.
just to count.
Sometimes it'd be 30 minutes a vote.
Has anybody complained about the clicker process? Some, I've heard in other towns where they want it to be open and you need to stand up.
Yeah, that's
for
the
your-
one thing about it, is
Yeah.
it makes it a,
It makes it a secret vote in a way, but
I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just wondering if
that
any.
hasn't been an issue here. I know that there were folks.
Wenham had an issue with it?
I think Wenham does both, right? You click and you hold. They still, I believe they still do that.
Just for like a public shaming opportunity?
yeah,
Yeah,
basically,
that's
yeah.
what
That's
they
pretty
wanted
much.
to provide
Not
public
shaming or stand for
process.
what you,
I think we get a better vote this way, and
Yeah, I do
also I'd
too.
like that we do I like that we do the sample vote where you can see your number, and when you hit the
Yeah.
clicker, your number lights up so people have that trust that,
Everyone
okay.
loves chocolate
Not as
ice
many
cream,
people
was
like
it,
chocolate
or-
ice cream as we thought.
Chocolate ice cream.
that was good.
My only technical thing is that I would love to have a screen that we're looking at
Yeah.
on the floor in front of the first row of seats, so we can see without having to turn
Especially if
around.
you, like, with Joe, when you were presenting.
With the
No,
presentations, yeah.
No, the presentation.
Okay.
Slide deck in front of us. Usually what you do is when you're a speaker, you have a screen
Yeah.
on the floor that you can see. So,
I'll ask
Maybe
about
there's
that.
some little monitor or something we can do.
longer of a table because
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that was tough.
yeah, I don't know why we
Need
can't.
one more chair.
To know these two pretty well.
And I would suggest that
Bill Olson's motion was half the meeting.
Yeah. It's funny, because I signed the kind of who was going to read stuff over the
Section,
phone
chapter,
with John
verse,
and
three-
Joe. And as I get to the meeting, I go, oh, I gave Bill the hour and a half long
I'm never
motion.
missing the meeting before the meeting. My punishment.
He's like, oh no, we got.
But I would suggest,
did
I know
well.
we can't change the ATM dates because it's been a citizen's petition and it's not set in stone, but it's been voted on that they're the Saturdays in April. But I would suggest that we continue the weeknight whenever possible in the STM when we have it. I mean, unless there's a huge docket.
Do you differ from STM versus annual town meeting?
Yeah, it's a different
The bylaw says that
There was a citizen petition to change it to Saturdays.
Okay.
So you could change it, but it would have to go back before town meeting to be changed. So somebody
it.
would have to initiate a question on the warrant to change the meeting day again.
And with STM, there was no petition. We
Got it.
just had it on
Okay, I didn't
a
realize that.
weekend just because the ATM was on a weekend.
I thought it was an efficient meeting. I think, to Bill's point, all the logistics, kudos to there, but also the content, everything that was done, presentations put together, gave for a nice fluid flow. There weren't a lot of questions because I think they were all presented as such. And granted, there wasn't a lot of controversial stuff, but I think it was an efficient, well-run meeting.
I'd like the select board put forward a warrant that had a lot of articles that were aimed at helping the people in the town, particularly the seniors,
Yeah.
but people in town. The septic bylaw, the stuff around the home rule petition, and the raising the threshold for qualifying for the senior tax exemption. Those are great programs to be able to offer to your residents, and where you're usually asking town meeting for something, you were asking town meeting to give something, which was great.
Yeah.
And I think that the other good point to Joe's point to add to it is that many of the things on our warrant were brought to us not by ourselves, but from citizens or other groups looking to help those individuals, and then we sponsored them. Kind of, as oftentimes we would get a citizen's petition because either we're not listening or they don't think we're listening. And so this was a good cooperation between town and citizen.
Agree.
Anything else?
Thank you, Bill, for doing it again.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you, work, Bill.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Bowler.
More, Bill, one
Thanks.
more.
Thanks
That's all
for
we
waiting
need.
to
Just
the
one
end of the
more.
meeting.
One more
Sorry
time.
about that.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This was longer than the meeting itself, right?
The whole meeting was.
True story. You sit around, yes.
All right, we have up next, approve select board meeting calendar for January 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2024. This is one of the last things in
So
the
you have
packet,
a couple of choices to make here. So, in January and April, you have some, I need you to kind of, in February. January, February, and April, we need you to make a decision. It's either the Tuesday or the Monday, and four different spots there. But we'd like to get this out ahead of time so that people know when you're meeting, so we can start to plan the meetings and plan the budget process around it, so.
Are we hitting any holidays for you, Bill? I know sometimes we forget our
Not this time of year.
fine Jewish members of the board here.
Not this time of year. Yep, we'll be fine.
Anybody else? And any thoughts on the January meetings?
April Fool's Day, you're really gonna have a meet on April Fool's Day?
It's not a real holiday, so it's not like you
Are there a
can't-
couple that you
everybody's
want us
gonna be
to
at work.
say and/or? I mean, the second I might
So-
not be around, but I don't plan
I
on.
would, with the January meetings, what I would say is that the
Yeah.
2 Mondays, there are 5 Mondays in
Yeah, it's a
January. So
5.
if you went the 8th and the 22nd, you're not running into any holidays or anything like
Yeah, I
that.
would do the 8th and the 22nd.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's the one I'm asking for. The other is,
Is Martin Luther King?
It's the 15th.
It's the 15th, it's that weekend.
I would always prefer to have it on a Monday rather than a Tuesday, so the 26th for me is better than the 20th.
So let's do the 8th and the 22nd.
And then the next
January.
month, just do the 26th.
February 26th, you said? Yeah.
And then we have the
Fine
same
with
thing
me.
in April.
Yeah.
the 22nd.
The
Is that,
22nd.
is that during a break?
It
Is that
might
during a
be.
school break?
Which one, the March one?
The
April 22nd.
April 22nd.
No, because usually the break is,
The February one, I think, is after the break.
Yeah, because the break is that week of the 18th.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that Monday, April 22nd is the break, because I think that the break starts with the Monday holiday. in
yeah, it
April.
usually starts with a Monday holiday.
So April 16th is probably during the break then, is
Right.
what we're guessing.
Right.
So then let's do the Monday, April 22nd.
Although
So-
I may not be on the board anymore by then.
Easy. When about would annual town meeting be?
The first.
The
Or no,
first
it'd
of
be it'd be
Another 3
It'd
years.
be,
that first
April
weekend in
6th.
April.
Yeah.
It's
the
gonna be
6th.
April 6th.
April 6th, so does that influence what we want to do for April for meetings?
Well, the April 6th will be,
The 1st, I guess.
April 6th will be your meeting, and then the election is the Thursday
Following
after. So
Thursday.
it's April 12th or something.
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be, maybe, there'd be
like
10
a
days
week.
between, there'd be 10 days
I think that's
between the
fine.
election and the first meeting of the new board.
Okay, when's our meeting?
We have one on
April
the,
6th, and that would be when would the election be, the what?
April 12th,
because town meeting's like
whatever
the
the following
6th, I think
Thursday is.
that's
Oh, the
that's Saturday.
11th.
Yeah.
on the 11th, sorry. So there's 11 days between the election and the first meeting, which isn't that much.
No, it's not a,
Am I supposed to say something?
No?
no, we're just looking at you. Any other
Can
thoughts?
y'all just remind me, for December, are we the 4th and the 8th? It's the same cadence
Yes,
for
the
the
4th
4th
and
and
4th and
18th?
18th, yeah.
Okay. And then we're saying we wouldn't meet again until the
January 8th, right.
So there'll be a 3-week gap there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough time for you to write out your thank you notes for
Yeah.
Yeah,
for Christmas and Hanukkah.
I totally thought this meeting was gonna be super fast, and I was supposed to pick Arthur up at 8:15.
How'd that go for you?
Well, Cory, of course, texts and was like, are you going, and I was like,
He's old enough. It's fine. All right, new business? Anybody new business?
I think tonight really brought to light a lot we need, like on, even specific on 3A, I don't know.
I have something under new business, if you don't mind. It came in late, after the packets went out. There was a request from the...
Oh, for the sign, yeah.
For the sign to be, so the Merrily We Go Along is the play that's being done by the high school, I believe, and they're asking to hang a sign on the sign rack in front of the COA. So the sign is 3 feet wide by however many feet you need to get across the thing.
I'm gonna, before April 6th, I'm going to work on the banner, sign and banner bylaw.
That's your last.
And sidewalks.
Yeah.
that's what we need from
so
you. This is the kind of commitment we need.
I know it's not on the agenda, but it's really just a approval of a sign.
How long is it up for?
Just
They
the
need it-
duration of the
Yeah, just
play.
before the play, and the play's coming up. That's why
I'd make a motion to approve the banner for the high school play and the COA.
Perfect. Second, all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, ayes have it. All right, other new business, to Bill's point, we got a lot, HDC downtown zoning stuff going on.
There are other things to keep in mind, too. The state, through the Mass Housing Partnership, did give us a grant for $15,000 and draft a 3A zoning bylaw for us. It exceeded the 49 acres that we're required to have by the law, and Patrick and I pushed back, and Patrick had a meeting with them, and we were successful in getting MMHP to give us more grant money to make the consultant go back and fix it and bring it back to 49 acres, if we want. So there's a lot of conversation that has to be had around the 3A zoning. My only concern, really, with the idea about using form-based code to address the 3A zoning, though, is that we're supposed to have something adopted by December of '24.
Yeah, that's what it says, yeah.
And if not, there's lots of grants and things that we lose access to. There is actual funding to the Hamilton Housing Authority that we will not get anymore until we adopt 3A zoning. And the word I'm hearing out of the state is that the new administration is planning to
Make good on their threat.
well, to make even more penalties for not adopting the 3A zoning. So there have been some that were publicized by the Baker administration before they left, that they had written in, and they've added grants that we would no longer be able to apply for, and there's talk of additional penalties beyond that for not adopting 3A zoning. So Emil says that 3A zoning will take 18 to 24 months to put together with the form-based code. I don't know if we have 24 months.
What's the deadline you said? December
Next
what?
December.
year.
Or it's a year.
Number 24?
I think we need to work on a parallel track.
Who was the consultant we used?
It was paid for, the name will lose me. It was a company that was paid by Mass Housing Partnership. So basically, it was technical assistance. They didn't give us $15,000. They gave us this company because they were working with 2 or 3 companies, and everybody got one. Everybody that asked for got one of them.
Does it make sense, though, to have a consultant from the state basically do that for us?
Mass
Is that
Housing Partnership
representative?
isn't technically the state. So there's Mass Housing, which is an official, part of the administration, and then Mass Housing Partnership is a nonprofit that is privately funded, partly funded by the state government, partly funded by developers, that provides assistance, technical assistance money to communities trying to do planning or review of,
I guess I wouldn't be
Fee,
surprised they
things like
came back with more because of their affiliation. That's all.
They're housing advocates, so they
Right,
came back
right.
with more because they're housing advocates.
No, that's great. But is that the
But
consultant you want to
we-
do for
but
the town?
What we told them was, you want us to put something forward that's gonna get passed by town meeting.
This isn't it.
I'm gonna have trouble getting the minimum passed by town meeting, and you're expanding this by 33%? Doesn't make sense.
So this needs to be on the docket in April,
Or at special town meeting in the fall.
or a special time meeting in the fall.
Most likely in the fall.
I think it might be a phase to, it's got to be at least addressed there. It can't all come out in the fall, I guess, if December is the ultimate decision. Some communities are already coming out and have had their meetings, and I don't know if there's
A lot
a
of towns have
benefit
adopted
to.
It has to come out of the planning board though, right?
Well,
Not
not
necessarily.
necessarily. The select board can put forward zoning,
Yeah.
but it's just that in this town, politically, you'd be seen as overstepping your authority if you did that.
Yeah, we could have brought the Browns Hill overlay district from our board, but Joe felt that it was better to go with the planning board because, as Joe said,
So the planning
The
board's on a
optics of
path
it.
of 24 months, so do we need to kind of
Well, that's what you said.
reset and get
I think
something
there's
that goes to
further
December?
conversations that need to be had. There's what you want to do and what you have to do, right? So we have to have a conversation about what gets done and when.
right.
Okay.
But my understanding the last time we had the conversation, and I would truthfully love to just do like a total,
You're talking 3A.
the 3A, like information dump.
Yep, I would
about
love that.
All of it. Like, I would love to just spend 90 minutes
Yep.
talking about, like, line by line, like, what are the things, because this first came up when Corey was on the planning board. And he had said, when you take what they're asking versus what we do and don't have, versus the bylaws that we already have in place, that they don't usurp, no matter what we put forth, it literally cannot be built, because we already have zoning bylaws and overlay bylaws and septic bylaws and all of these things that, like, I think the exact thing was like, there's just really nothing to worry about in the end, when you take it line by
But at
line.
Winthrop, it could be built at Winthrop.
But
That's what I was trying to say earlier. If you
Could
lay
be
that
built.
out in
Winthrop and
Winthrop, that's
Dodge.
what's going to end up at
Winthrop
Winthrop,
and Dodge
guaranteed.
Tree are the only places that it really could be built, those
But
two places.
currently, it can't be, because that's not zoned, like, right, it's not zoned correctly
No.
for it. So that's the thing.
No, we have to.
You would have to
Yeah,
zone
we
it.
have to zone it for that.
And that, I don't know if that's
Have to
what's going
zone
to
it.
come out of this form base or not, but.
We have to change zoning to zone it for that.
We are required, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have
And
no choice.
But that's not 49 acres.
Doesn't
No,
need-
it's 14.
It's
It doesn't need to
14.
be. You have to just draw a line of, within these 49 acres, if it meets the requirements, you can build it,
If your neighbors and you sell your house.
Yeah.
then
That's a spot.
that's a spot, right?
So,
Dodge Street property, it will be an ideal
Dodge Street would be a spot, right?
Like, and why wouldn't
it's
they go
all
to them and
basically
like,
down.
It's available right now, but it means that over time, if someone decided to sell their property, you collected enough properties in a row, then you could build it then. But you have to identify 49 acres that it could be built if certain things happened.
okay, so this is why I'd like to go back, because back in the original one, it had to be 49 contiguous acres. And the whole thing was, there's not 49 contiguous acres. Like, it has to be
No,
can't be like
well,
10
there's-
here, 15 here, 30
The zoning would be the
Zoning area.
continuous acreage.
Doesn't mean it would be
Think
built.
of it as an overlay like we have now where it's
Right, right, right.
here,
But I thought
right?
that, what we're saying is, even with that 14, within our downtown zoned district, you can't come up with 49, so we don't meet the minimum requirement to even be required to
But depends if you,
build.
I don't know if you can call it Patton Park. I don't know if you can
You
include
can't,
Patton Park in
because
49
it's
acre.
restricted space. And that's what I want to like go through, because Corey was like, when you look at it,
need to go through it.
even if we went through the plan and we picked up all these other parcels, unless the people who own the land were the equestrian farms, if both of them decided to sell their property to the town, then you'd have the 49 like maybe in the right area. But he was like, I think when you lay all the things on top of each other,
The equestrian farms on 1A?
no, the ones back that way,
The Wenham side?
the Wyndham side,
Yeah, that's on the Wenham side, right.
right?
Prince property.
Yeah, that wouldn't help us anyway.
And so that's what I want to sort of understand is like, how much of this is sort of like Chicken Little because we're taking like one part of it versus if we're saying it has to be within a certain distance of the train station and it has to be a certain amount of space and it has to adhere to a certain level of bylaws.
Doesn't have to currently.
So,
What you're missing, doesn't have to
Force us
currently.
to do it.
well, they can't.
Yes,
force us
they
to
can
do it,
force to
but
do it,
they
else we
can-
don't get any grants.
Yeah, they're already, you know, one of the things that wasn't said tonight was that we didn't get the MassWorks grant because that's one of the grants that they're holding over our head. Until you
For
pass
this.
3A zoning, they're not gonna give you MassWorks grants.
But we can go back to them and say, we don't have 49 acres, but we have 15 and we're willing to do as much as we can reasonably do, right? Like,
No, you have to draw the overlay district that's 49 acres, and it is what it is.
right, okay.
But you'll probably only get a
But you
small
probably
subset
only
of
going
that
to
to
get
happen.
15 acres that are available to do it.
Which is
But you
kinda what
still-
Marnie was saying.
But
She
you
was
still
saying,
draw
you
the,
basically-
you still draw the boundary over 49 acres. Doesn't mean you can do it today,
Right.
but it means that you've identified a 49, we can identify 49 acres within a half mile of the train that's private property.
Right. That's,
do.
and I think that's
Yeah.
why I'm a little
Yeah.
confused, is that it was like, it doesn't exist, like,
Yeah.
you can tell them whatever, there's not, it's unreasonable.
Right, it's probably
that
never going to happen.
anybody's gonna sell their property, a single-family house, in the conditions that Hamilton is gonna
But,
randomly
okay,
sell.
so let me give you a worst case scenario.
Yeah,
Go to Danvers,
yep,
and say somebody bought the entire city block over the course of 10 years and tore everything down.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, that could happen.
that could happen.
Okay, so that happened in
Someone would be
Danvers.
So when
insistent
it,
because
say,
they'll get
just
more
down the
density
street.
and
say
more money
Cutter
for that same
decides to
property.
liquidate all his buildings downtown. Because he owns most of downtown.
But again, they still have to adhere to height restrictions for downtown, facade restrictions for downtown, septic for
But the new,
downtown.
but the new zoning would have an as-of-right prescription, so as long as you did these things and had a minimum of 15 units per acre, you would as-of-right be able to build, as long as you were within those
the
setback.
height
and
limit.
height.
But not if it doesn't, if it can't, again, I don't wanna
We
like.
need a 90-minute meeting.
We need, because
Yeah,
again,
right.
you can't put 250 units there, because you can't build a septic big enough for 250
Right,
units.
right.
You
We're
can't
limited by infrastructure.
Yeah, we're
You're
limited
limited
by
by
infrastructure. Yes,
infrastructure.
right.
I don't think the
Eventually-
trains will be able to handle that many people.
And so that's why I wanna like
Right.
unfold it, like when we say these like shocking things, like what if they
But
sold
you,
this
you want to know what the
block?
worst, you want to know,
Yeah, it's
even
like,
if we
guys,
approve the bylaw, what's the worst case scenario that
Even
can
if they
happen?
did, they still can't build it
Right, we
over.
would get 100 houses, and it would be in these pockets, right? You want to look at like the, I get
Right,
that.
I think that's a
agree, yeah.
worthwhile exercise, because like to your point, to Bill's point too, you've got this overarching, here's the map that it can happen in.
Yeah.
It may only happen in 10 acres of that, but in that 10 acres of that,
You gotta get 150 homes.
you can't get 150 homes, you can get 10 homes because of the septic
Because of septic.
limitations.
Right.
And
Right.
that's where I think
So you
there's
just
like.
say it, but it.
Yeah, but they would go put
Yes.
it, but the builder would go put in one of these
Right.
septic systems.
They'd put in a water.
They'd
Because
put
it's
in
not
water
affordable
treatment
housing, they can get
plant.
good
Right.
money for it, and they'll
They
get
put a little
more
mini
units
water
per
treatment
acre.
plant
Yeah.
in, and they do
Yeah.
it. So I mean, it's always a workaround.
There's always a workaround, but what's that density that we
Right, what's the
could do
density?
even with the water treatment plant?
Is there a benefit to work with other towns along the tracks and kind of, as a group, talk about pros, cons,
The other side of the tracks?
strategies?
We're all in the boat together, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, and if others have the same concerns and issues, is there value going back as a group, as town managers,
Has anybody like,
administrators?
yeah, has
to-
anybody sued, is any community sued?
Well,
sued-
yeah, I didn't want to say, yeah, I was thinking, I mean, is there any aggregated voice of reason or validation to help, you know, like, I know Wenham's going through the same thing. I mean, imagine, they have 750 units, we have 750 around. 1,500 units in these.
I think Wenham's in more jeopardy than
within-
we are. We've got to develop downtown. They've got a huge open space.
They've got a couple big parcels that could
Yeah, right there, those horse farms, right on the.
But that's privately held, right, so someone, right, that's the principal.
The owner of that property
Owner's like-
passed recently.
That property
That
is
property's
in probate or
that
something.
property's in probate now because the owner of that property passed recently.
Right,
That's
so
that could sell for a lot of money if it can be 15 units per acre.
that could be all of it.
Good, yeah.
But unless
Fred
they
Wenham.
Plus you go back through Larch.
the market, right, like, again, I
No,
don't know.
That's a good point too, will they sell? and-
Yeah, like the market, there's still, you can't put 150, like, $500,000 tiny units. Like, what does the developer want to get for them? And I think the 40B question is a big one, like, depending on what happens at 133, like, yeah, somebody could go put a giant 40B somewhere.
Well, the state clearly wants that to be workforce housing.
Yeah.
They haven't come out and
Right,
said that,
more
they
village
haven't come out and said it had to be 40B, it had to be affordable, but they clearly want it to be
They're
attainable
incentivizing
for
And they're gonna be
middle
small,
class.
right, that the size of them,
Yeah,
I
they
don't- I
clearly
don't-
want it to be
That's the
attainable
problem,
for
it's
middle
either
class.
40B or it's market rate.
the only way to do
They can say
this,
what they want, but the developer's gonna wanna get their money for it.
Right.
but they'll do a lot of them, they'll make it up in volume, I think, so.
And-
It won't be
and-
affordable, but it'll be in the
Somebody
middle.
will come in and do like what is being proposed out on 133 now, is that, 133
And it's
Essex now. They'll propose something that's 150 units, 25% of them will be for
Right.
affordable housing, and then the rest will be market rate, and the market rate will carry the net for it.
Right.
But that takes 44 total contiguous acres to do what they just did over there. And that's where I think going through the whole thing and saying,
Yeah, we do need to go through
what
it.
does it look like, and how scared should we be?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like
Yeah, what's the worst case?
it's just always a lot of like,
Hey, question for you, Wilson, Willow Flat. How many apartments are still available?
Yeah, did they all sell? I wanted to ask that, but I thought I should know that.
Rentals, right? So
They're all
Eight,
full.
all 18, did they go like that? Yeah.
That's what's
They're
good, but
nice,
they
I've
all
walked back
rented
through
out.
it.
because but there was also, was it a senior
There's one,
lottery for a rental? Or was it a senior lottery for a,
No, there was a lottery for
Couple, maybe.
affordable housing, but I don't think there was a senior restriction.
I don't think there's a senior restriction,
oh, okay.
but I think they're all full. I feel like they filled up.
so we
pretty
can't really debate this much further because this is supposed to be a new agenda.
Yeah, new
Right.
agenda, we need to put this
But,
on.
I
guess our
But yeah,
new-
so
what's on
the
new
agenda is a
agenda?
90-minute on, you know, what Carol said.
business will be
A
a-
90-minute under sort of
Could I perhaps focus us in trying to get it ready for you guys for the January 8th meeting?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
If
And then-
Patrick isn't buried under Chabaco emails.
And then this,
I'm buried.
all this email and noise on, are we supposed to, and I know we had there's a standard canned response on this 133 thing, but.
I think if you're gonna respond, stick to canned response
Yeah, that
or
was good,
similar
by
to
the way.
But I
canned.
mean, can we say it now for people who are listening, like what our,
So
what our
I think you've
response is?
gotten most of what you're gonna get, because.
There was a push for it getting
there was
by
there was a
today.
push to get them in by the
There's a letter I had to
comment
sign
deadline, which was
today.
today.
Okay.
So the comment deadline was the 20th.
Okay.
And the town had to get their comments, and so there was a organized push by opponents to get letters of comment in by today. So
Gotcha.
I doubt that we're gonna get many more beyond today.
So that letter you signed today, that whole email was our comments? Was there anything else that went? You sent, there was an email today, I saw.
There's a packet, yeah,
Yeah, there's a
packet of
packet.
all.
You had a bunch of emails and
Yes.
forwards from each of your department heads, that
Yes.
was our comment
That was our
response.
packet.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So I signed it and Patrick sent it off today.
Okay.
Other new business, we had a Hamilton resident of, or how can I say this? A Hamilton Wenham School Committee member who is a Hamilton resident resigned, who was just elected on the board, so we have a vacancy. And the way it works with the regional agreement is if someone from Hamilton resigns before the end of their term, that they take applications, with I think they started taking today for the position, and then our select board and the school committee will have a meeting where we'll hash out the applicants as we did, I think, when you were on the board one time before, maybe we did it.
Yeah, I remember.
We had another vacancy.
Do you know how many years are left? Is it?
Just fresh terms, so there's
Yeah.
2 more years on the term.
We did this when Gene Lee left.
When Gene Lee left, right.
A couple years ago.
Amy?
Carr.
What? Oh, okay, yeah.
No.
Wasn't it, or no,
The people live next to the middle.
I can't.
They move?
Why can't I think of the name
No,
right
she
now?
wants to be able to.
She's
build
part
a-
of the
school. No school.
resistance on the Winthrop School, so she left.
It's not Carr, it's, that's who was at the meeting today.
That's what's the meeting. Why can't I think of the name for some reason? we just.
Doesn't matter.
Should we
She
put
just-
out
she's
there if
random.
anyone's interested in being a school committee member?
So if
Sometimes-
anybody's interested in
School
school
committee's already
committee,
done that, yeah.
and you can.
Hamilton shouldn't do that? We shouldn't, as long as they've done it. I haven't seen it, though, so I don't.
They just did it today, so if you know of anybody that wants to be on school committee, anybody listening at home, if you want to be on school committee, please
Caroline do both?
turn in an application. But so I bring it up on your new. I bring it up under new business because the school committee chair, Dana Alara, and I have talked a handful of times about this, and we're thinking a December 6th meeting to look at the candidates and make a decision. And we'll be at the top of the agenda, and we'll go through that first, and then they'll do their regular meeting afterwards. So December 6th, 7 o'clock. And we also have a meeting,
Wait, is this something fresh I have to put in my calendar?
yes, it is, December 6th, 7 o'clock, school committee,
At the
select
Bucher-
board at Bucher School,
Bucher multipurpose room.
at the multipurpose room.
And didn't
Also-
Eric throw some
Holiday
meetings out
party-
there? too?
holiday
For
party
budget? Did
season.
Eric throw a bunch of budget meetings out?
Yeah,
Is there
so
a
I was
December
just
one?
gonna
We
say,
got
there's a
bunch of
handful of
meetings.
meetings too, I think.
The 29th was moved from 4:30 to 6:30?
I think it was original, it was, the 4:30 is an original mistake. It was always, that's our first 5 boards meeting, where we get everybody together and talk about what our budget situation is, and that's always an evening meeting, so.
So that was the other one I was gonna tell you about, was that December
About
meeting.
bringing children.
Bring them.
Can you just, like,
I used to
sit?
bring my kids
You can just sit in a chair.
when they were younger,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, then I can.
Yep.
December 6th is a Wednesday,
Correct.
Headphones and a screen.
and it's at, what time did you
Bucher.
say, 7?
7. And then the other meeting is what's the
And
5
what's
boards?
that
on-
one?
What date is that one? Do you
What's
know
this
offhand?
December 6th thing?
It's the December 6th one is our board and the school committee for the candidates, for the spill the vacancy.
It's
And
Wednesday,
it-
the 29th is the other one.
And
Wednesday, November 29th.
And the way the vacancy works, just so we're on the same page beforehand, is that whoever we appoint to that vacancy fills the role until elections in April.
Oh.
They can choose to run, or they can choose to stop.
They
in
don't get the
April.
whole term.
They don't get the whole term.
They have to run.
They have to run. They don't have to run, but they fill the
No,
vacancy.
yeah,
They can
but they
choose to
can't
run if
just
they
keep
want to.
going.
Yeah, they just can't keep
Will that be
going.
available virtually, like Zoom?
My other thing was that if you cannot be there, we can offer a Zoom component for you to be there.
Okay, I think. that-
Preferably in person, but if you have some other
And the
circumstance.
vote, how's the vote work for this? Is it?
One
that
person,
you
one vote.
Add them all together?
Add them all together. It's a combined.
It's laid out in the district agreement.
So there's the 6 of them, 5 of us, or whatever, so.
So outnumber us. They could be unanimous, we can be negative, and it would still
Correct.
pass. Okay.
Correct.
But it's only Hamilton people applying, you said.
Only Hamilton people and Hamilton Select
Not that
Board.
that matters, I'm just,
No.
make sure I understand. So we've got a meeting on the 29th of November, a meeting on December 6th. I'm just writing this down.
And then
our
there's
select board
another,
meeting,
let me
which
just
is-
look real quick when Eric's, that the 5. Can't think of it offhand, I'm trying to look for it. Did Eric send the invite to that 5 board meeting?
Yeah, I just saw it in Outlook.
Yeah.
It's the 29th, 6:30, is that what we're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, that's the other one. All right, that's all I got.
Yeah, I think it's all.
Make a
Hey,
motion.
go
Is
over
there
and think
a
about today's
holiday
chairs
party?
meeting.
Is there a
Oh.
town hall holiday party?
No, there's a Patton State holiday party.
There is town hall staff party. I don't have the details on it yet. I'll let you know on the 29th.
Because I'm going to show up festive, just like I did.
I appreciate that. I'll get it all out to you by email as soon as you know.
Caroline, is that time?
Oh, I would, motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Thank you all for joining us if you're watching
No,
later.
7-ish.
Thank you, HW Cam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Don't run off before you sign something.